No one anticipated Horizon Valley's most unexpected hero to be the obese security officer at Sunrise Mall. With an ordinary uniform that hung over her bulky frame and a welcoming grin, Emma Blake had spent 15 years creating the ideal facade to conceal her elite special forces background. However, the infamous Hellhound Hand motorcycle gang was unaware that they were dealing with one of the military's most deadly combat specialists when they made the mistake of pursuing her. A clash that would change not only the gang but the entire community would result from what started out as ordinary harassment that turned out to be one of the biggest weapons trafficking enterprises in the state. This is the tale of how one woman's perseverance and talent revealed a criminal enterprise operating in plain sight, and how 6 motorcyclists discovered the hard way that outward looks can be deceiving. Though sometimes fate has other ideas, Emma Blake never intended to be a hero again. Tell us where you're tuning in from before we resume. Make sure to subscribe if this tale resonates with you, as I have something really special in store for you tomorrow. As Emma Blake did her morning rounds, the fluorescent lights of Sunrise Mall created long shadows across the deserted hallways. Too fast to brush off the overweight security officer in her well-maintained uniform, her hefty bulk moved with a subtle grace that most people missed at 45. At every storefront, she took a moment to carefully inspect the locks and security systems. Behind her, she heard Jack Peterson's footsteps, his keys jangling at his hip. "You're here early once more, Emma." As she answered, Emma carried on with her careful inspection. "Jack, old habits. In addition, someone must ensure that everything is prepared before the masses come." The mall's glossy floor started to take on patterns as the early sun started to peek through the skylights. 3 young males were loitering near the east door, trying too hard to be casual, when Emma's trained eyes noticed a reflection in a darkened store window. Though she didn't alter her routine, she mentally noted it. Emma went through the tape from the previous night in the security office. She cycled among camera feeds with practiced precision, her fingers moving over the keyboard with surprisingly dexterous agility given their stature. Jack shook his head admiringly as he observed her work. "I've always wondered why you take your work so seriously. Most guards spend their entire day staring at their phones." Emma's gaze remained fixed on the screens. "Jack, everyone has their own standards. I was only a little bit higher than others." As she watched a delivery truck pull into the loading dock, the burden of her past weighed heavily on her mind. She had been in charge of combat operations in locations that the general public was unaware of 15 years prior. She now shielded mall patrons and adolescent mall rats, and on most days, it was plenty. Arrival of Ruth Whitaker at 8:45 a.m. marked the formal beginning of the day at the mall. Prior to turning the corner with her shopping bag already in hand, the elderly woman's presence was proclaimed by her clicking heels. "I hoped you'd be here today, Emma, my love. Have you heard about Mason County's awful bikers? The Hellhound Hand gang is reportedly relocating to our neighborhood." Emma's body somewhat changed position. "Mrs. Whitaker, I've heard the rumors. Don't worry. At Sunrise, things are fairly peaceful here." The morning moved along according to its normal course. Emma aided Maria from housekeeping with a blocked supply closet door, gently diverted some boisterous teens, and helped an elderly guy with his walker. Every encounter was characterized by her deliberate motions, which never betrayed the combat awareness that followed every individual in her field of vision. The first motorbike rumbling reverberated through the parking lot at 10:17 a.m. 6 bikes blasted into view as Emma stood at her security desk, watching through the cameras. They appeared to be in disarray, but their formation was professional, methodical, and militaristic. The trio was commanded by Logan, Viper, and Wilson, whose leather cut boldly displayed the Hellhound Hand colors. Emma's keen eye took note of his demeanor and mannerisms. The chip on his shoulder indicated a dishonorable discharge, and he was formerly in the military, most likely Marines. Marcus Enville Thompson, whose enormous body was terrifying even from a distance, positioned himself behind him in a flanking position. The motions of Ray Smoke Peters, who appeared to be undergoing reconnaissance training, blended into the background. To anyone else, the arrangement of Steve Recruit Carter, Jake Gear Miller, and Bobby Atlas Davidson would have appeared haphazard. Problem? Observing Emma's serious concentration on the monitors, Jack inquired. Emma's voice was deliberately casual as she answered, "Just some new visitors. It would be better to conduct a walkthrough to ensure everyone feels secure." She stood with her uniform draped across her heavy body. People underestimated her because of the weight she had gained after leaving the service, which had become its own kind of armor. She could still remember Jack's worried face, questioning if she should confront possible troublemakers. The weight of command, the lives at stake, and the recollection of her most recent assignment flashed across her thoughts. She had a reason for choosing this more sedate existence, but she could see the beginnings of something more significant as she saw the bikers examining the mall's design. Emma acknowledged both customers and store owners as she navigated the mall with practiced ease. She was a familiar, comforting figure, just another chubby security guard on duty. However, she passed every key location along the way, carefully noting sight lines and possible choke spots. Logan's voice echoed through the atrium as Emma walked by. "Guys, have a look at what we have. A true professional security force is in place at malls." The group burst out laughing, but Emma could hear the stress in their voices. They were testing reactions while putting on a show. She turned to them, her fingers casually resting next to her radio. "Gentlemen, welcome to Sunrise Mall. Is there anything I can do for you today?" Her calm tone caused Logan's eyes to narrow. When the Hellhound Hand appeared, people typically displayed fear. "I'm just perusing, my love, to make sure the nearby companies are aware of their new neighbors." Emma kept her gaze fixed on him, her posture relaxed but poised. "I would appreciate it if you could move your bikes out of the fire lane while you're shopping. You understand safety regulations?" Logan's eyes never saw the danger in his smile. "Do you hear that, boys? Safety guidelines. We wouldn't want to start a fight, would we?" Emma observed how they had positioned themselves, covering exits and observing reactions, but there was still more laughter. This intimidation wasn't arbitrary. They were even more dangerous since they were professionals posing as regular thugs. As an old veteran with a cane approached, Emma's trained eye could see his military bearing, and the tension eased. A frequent visitor to the mall, Thomas Bennett's speech exuded the authority of his previous position. "Is everything okay, Emma?" "Just fine, Mr. Bennett," Emma said, observing Logan's change in position as Bennett drew closer. Our new pals were on the verge of relocating their bicycles to the appropriate parking space. They were separated by a silent interval that was laden with implicit danger. Logan then nodded, his feigned politeness concealing true threat. "Naturally, you wouldn't want to break any rules. Boys, hurry up." Emma heard bits and pieces of the motorcyclists talk as they walked away. She became alarmed by words like shipment and scheduling. Something more significant was developing in Horizon Valley. This was not merely gang posturing. "Don't go up against them by yourself," Bennett muttered. "The Hellhound Hand is something I've heard about. They're not your usual miscreants." Through the glass, Emma observed the gang shifting their bikes and continuing to look around the mall's layout. "Mr. Bennett, don't worry about me. I can manage a few unruly patrons." However, Emma's mind was already working through the ramifications as she resumed her rounds. The gang's military accuracy, their strategic analysis of the shopping center, and the bits of conversation all suggested that this was more than just intimidation. She had remained undercover for 15 years, seeking solace in the mundaneness of everyday existence. However, Emma realized her peaceful existence at Sunrise Mall was going to get significantly more complicated as she watched Logan take one last look at the mall's layout before leaving. The tension persisted even as the sound of motorcycles rumbled out into the distance. Emma Blake, a former Special Forces operator who is now a mall security officer, had seen that Logan had a man with a mission in his eyes. What kind of purpose would bring a well-developed criminal outfit to Horizon Valley, the question was. Emma's phone rang with a message from an old military contact as the day settled back into its regular rhythm. Hellhound Hand has been linked to the trafficking of weapons. Large operation building. Be mindful of your back. Emma's amiable grin concealed the strategic calculations she was doing as she erased the message and carried on with her rounds. Allowing your adversaries to believe they are in control is sometimes the best way to keep people safe. That lesson was going to be learned the hard way for the Hellhound Hand. It took us a long time to prepare and tell this story, so please subscribe to our channel if you find it entertaining. It means a lot to us. Let's return to the narrative. The ambience of Horizon Valley changed in an unpleasant way the following morning. While driving to the mall before daybreak, Emma became aware of it. Watchers trying too hard to be casual, new faces in parked automobiles. Most people wouldn't see the signs, but the Hellhound Hand was setting up surveillance spots all across the town. At 5:45 a.m., Emma parked into her normal parking space, gathering her uniform jacket and lunch bag with purposeful slowness. She could make out 3 onlookers in her peripheral vision, a man smoking under a burned-out light pole, another in a blue sedan at the loading dock, and a third feigning to check his phone outside the employee door. Emma went through the nighttime footage at the security office with a keen eye for detail. She crossed timestamps with a mental log of known gang movements as her fingers moved across the keyboard. Under the guise of theatrical intimidation, the Hellhound Hand had spent the night charting the mall's layout, their patterns exposing military training. Jack showed up about 6:30 a.m. bringing coffee and worry. Have you noticed the recently opened bike shop on Mason Street? Hellhound Hand hues are all over the place, they are no longer even attempting to blend in. With her gaze fixed on the surveillance feeds, Emma nodded. Being evident can sometimes be a cover for something else. She observed that delivery trucks had modified their routes to steer clear of specific streets. Already, the gang was affecting local business practices. Slowly, the mall sprang to life as early morning shoppers showed up like clockwork. Emma continued her rounds as normal, but each movement had a purpose. She also looked for indications of intimidation each time she assisted Mrs. Chen in opening her gift shop. She recorded which clients were needlessly interested in the mall's service corridors while helping Mr. Patel deliver his kiosk. When shops opened, Emma's first destination was Jenny Parker's cafe. Her counter was a natural gathering place for neighborhood rumors, and the young proprietor had a talent for gathering information. More significantly, Jenny had already picked up on details that others had overlooked. Jenny whispered softly, "They were here last night," as she passed Emma's typical cup of coffee over the counter. Their leader was one of the 3. They met with someone I didn't recognize for an hour in the rear booth. They had a fancy suit and a military demeanor. Emma carefully and methodically added sugar to her coffee. Any discussion? Something regarding inspection points and schedules, in fragments. Product quality was mentioned often throughout the litigation. They have nothing to do with motorbike parts. The morning proceeded according to a planned schedule. Emma observed how Ray Smoke Peters watched them from a distance as she assisted an elderly woman with her shopping bags. She intervened in an adolescent dispute by the fountain, taking use of the opportunity to note Marcus Enville Thompson's curiosity about the location of the mall's surveillance cameras. The pattern started to change at 10:15 a.m. In order to capture the morning shopping crowd, Logan Viper Wilson arrived with Steve Recruit Carter and Bobby Atlas Davidson. They talked briefly but passionately as they went from store to store. The store proprietors came out quiet and pallid. Before Logan could go to Mrs. Chen's gift shop, Emma stopped her. "Do you recall our conversation regarding security cameras? It would be appropriate to bring them up now." The old store owner gave a small nod, her eyes showing understanding. Mrs. Chen's courteous but strong reluctance to pay for protection was supported by unmistakable proof that any trouble would be captured on camera from several perspectives when Logan entered her business 15 minutes later. Emma continued to gather intelligence throughout the morning while putting on a front of helpful friendliness. She was able to observe without drawing notice because of her outfit and weight, which rendered her invisible to most people. The gang's scheme was too complex for straightforward extortion. During lunch, Jenny verified Emma's suspicions. As she refilled Emma's coffee, she whispered, "They're using the bike shop as a front, delivery made late at night, usually under strict security. They're bringing in crates that don't match any motorbike shipments that my brother, who works at the petrol station across the street, has ever seen." Emma's military contact buzzed a message on her phone. Major players are involved, weapons are traveling across 3 states, and territorial expansion is really a front. Everything was coming together. The gang's presence at Horizon Valley, their curiosity about the design of the mall, and the enigmatic visitor in the suit. All of these suggested that there was more going on than just local crime. The mall was perfect for covert shipping operations because of its extensive loading bays and proximity to major highways. Logan made his move around 2:45 p.m. The gang leader, with his studied and manufactured casualness, approached Emma as she was assisting a lost toddler in finding his mother. "What a devoted security guy," Logan noted, his tone containing just enough satire to be noticeable. "Always watching everything, always assisting others. It's as if you have a certain goal in mind." Emma remained professional, but she was mentally calculating distances and angles, taking note of the other gang members' placements around the atrium. "I'm just carrying out my duties, sir, which include keeping everyone safe." Logan's eyes never met his smile. "Safety is crucial. If anything occurred as a result of someone being overly preoccupied with other people's affairs, feel embarrassed." Wrapped in plausible deniability, the menace lingered in the atmosphere. Emma was aware of the tactic, which involved making witnesses to the discussion while maintaining the confidentiality of the true message. These were skilled operators engaged in a more complex scheme than typical criminals. "Thanks for your concern," Emma said in a kind but strong tone. "I have to continue my rounds, if you don't mind." Logan's soft words to his friends were heard by Emma's trained ear as she left. "There's a problem with that one, look into her background." Subtle intensification occurred in the afternoon. There were more gang members in the mall, and their behavior suggested that they were being watched closely. They were testing her reactions by having her view them. Emma stuck to her schedule, allowing them to witness precisely what they had anticipated, an obese security guard who took her work too seriously. Emma discovered that 3 motorbikes had blocked her car at closing time. Jake Gear Miller reclined against one, his easygoing demeanor concealing deliberate placement that was visible from several perspectives. "Nice evening," he said as Emma walked up. "The boss wants you to grasp a concept. This town is evolving. As it changes, so do intelligent people. People who are stubborn." The shrug he gave was profound in its threat. Emma was believable despite her slight hesitation. "Mr. Miller, I'm only a security guard. I don't want to cause difficulties." "Good thing," Jake said. Because trouble, even big rent-a-cops who believe they are someone they are not, tends to find those who ask too many questions. Emma was left alone in the parking lot as the bikers thundered off into the dusk. As she drove home, she observed the gang's increased surveillance. They were creating infrastructure for something more than mere intimidation, setting up control posts throughout Horizon Valley. Emma was in her apartment making dinner and going over her notes in her head. The gang's activities demonstrated a definite military influence, professional tradecraft concealed by theatrical thuggery, organized reconnaissance, and planned communication. A highly skilled individual was overseeing their operations. For the last time, her phone buzzed. Verified expansion of the weapons pipeline. There were several groups engaged. Keep an eye out for specialty shipments masquerading as regular ones. Emma erased the note and went about her evening as usual, but she was thinking about the ramifications. Horizon Valley wasn't the only place the Hellhound Hand was spreading. They were setting up a large operation, utilizing the mall's infrastructure and the town's advantageous location for something far riskier than neighborhood crime. Emma was getting ready for bed when she noticed activity outside her window. The car's occupants were overly intrigued by her building and drove by too slowly. The gang was increasing their surveillance, so there would be more difficulties tomorrow. They believed they were up against a mere security guard who required coercion to comply. Emma pulled back her curtains with a little smile. Letting your adversaries totally underestimate you was sometimes the best defense. She had to give them the impression that they were in control before the Hellhound Hand could learn that lesson. Emma Blake had been playing the part of the nondescript mall security guard who saw too much for 15 years, and the game was only getting started. The sound of cracking glass broke Emma's Sunday morning routine at Sunrise Mall. The crash reverberated through the still empty hallways, and then there were heated shouts coming from Mrs. Chen's gift shop. She recognized several boots on the tile with her skilled ear. At least 4 sets of deliberate movement. Emma saw Mrs. Chen being cornered behind her counter by Logan, Viper, Wilson, and 3 other Hellhound Hand members via the surveillance cameras. Despite the dread on her face, the old woman maintained her stubborn posture. 2 additional gang members were on guard outside, covering both directions to the shop. As a result of years of Special Forces training, Emma's mind went into tactical evaluation mode. The group had carefully considered when to strike. On Sunday morning, there were few witnesses, fewer security personnel, and the hallway cameras had been turned off. Professional work, implying that this went beyond mere intimidation. Through the early morning silence, Logan's voice could be heard clearly. Think about your family. You wouldn't want anything to happen to your grandchildren's lovely school. Mrs. Chen's voice faltered but remained steady. As I previously stated, I will not assist you in moving your packages through my storage area. This company is reputable. Despite her bulk, Emma moved silently, her years of training enabling her to approach unobserved. She observed Bobby Atlas Davidson's finger placement close to his jacket via the glass front of the store. Concealed firearm, most likely a small automatic. These were not petty criminals feigning toughness. They were skilled operators who used covert gang imagery. Unbiddenly, the recollection of her previous assignment flashed. The storehouse was located in a nation whose name was never mentioned in mission reports. Similar operators used civilian companies as a front for the shipment of weapons. In the mission, she had lost 2 team members. A familiar, icy focus descended upon her thoughts. Emma's voice broke the tension as she emerged in the doorway. Good morning, folks. Having issues with this? Logan turned, his expression briefly displaying displeasure before settling into well-practiced derision. Rent a cop, just a business conversation. Nothing that worries you. Emma entered the store with a purposefully informal gait, but she placed herself between Mrs. Chen and the gang members. In fact, I'm particularly worried about store security. Particularly when there are threats and damaged goods involved. Bobby Atlas Davidson tried to flank her, but he hesitated when he noticed Emma's little change of posture. His combat experience was aroused by something in her movement. An acknowledgement of conditioned reactions that did not correspond with her looks. Last warning, Logan muttered. Leave. Ignore what you heard. Civilian security guards aren't supposed to grasp everything. A small smile appeared on Emma's face. It's funny how understanding works. There are instances when people see precisely what they anticipate. The image you're trying to project is effectively sold by tough guys making fun of elderly store owners. Her tone caused Logan's eyes to narrow. Something else had replaced the derision of an obese security guard. Subtle assurance that spoke to depths that were hidden. His men's stance changed from one of intimidation to one of possible battle as he waved to them. Logan scoffed and said, "You've got a big mouth for someone who waddles around checking locks all day," but his eyes were assessing her with fresh interest. Perhaps you need to learn how to respect appropriate authority. Everyone in the room would remember what happened next in a different way. Mrs. Chen would claim that all she saw was a flurry of motion. Later, the gang members would quarrel over how they got to the floor. However, the undisabled security cameras captured 17 seconds of accurate combat maneuvers presented as awkward self-defense. Her apparent loss of balance turned into a flawless hip throw that sent Bobby tumbling into a display case, and Emma made sure to stumble as she unintentionally blocked his grab. Marcus Enville Thompson gasped on his knees as her frantic backward step to dodge his fist turned into a textbook joint lock. Emma stumbled into Logan and her elbow found the exact nerve cluster to numb his entire arm. "Oh gosh, I'm so sorry," she said, her voice full of genuine worry. "I become really awkward when I'm anxious." 3 gang members were on the ground at the end of the altercation, their moans mingling with the tinkling of shattered glass. Emma made sure to look scared and exhausted, although her breathing hadn't even accelerated. She pulled out her radio and shakily muttered, "Someone should call the police. In all this excitement, I hope no one has been gravely injured." Logan used his strong arm to lift himself up, and his eyes now displayed recognition rather than rage. "You're not what you pretend to be," he murmured softly, his voice pitched just high enough for her to hear. "It's not over yet." "Never is," Emma said, echoing his tone but continuing to look agitated for onlookers. "However, I am not who you believe me to be. Before you do anything else, you might want to think about that." 12 minutes later, Police Chief Ross showed up with a look that said he had anticipated trouble but not this specific situation. While patrol cars ostentatiously circled the parking area where the remaining gang members waited with barely restrained rage, he gathered statements. "Want to know how a chubby mall police officer easily brought down 3 bikers?" As his officers took pictures of the area, Ross requested in a low voice. Emma's voice remained apprehensive and contrite. "Chief, I guess I got lucky. Someone my size wasn't supposed to resist at all. You know, an element of surprise." Although he nodded slowly, Ross's eyes briefly conveyed that he didn't believe it. "Good luck, huh? Try not to get lucky too frequently, then. We are not dealing with your typical troublemakers." "No," Emma said, "sir. They're certainly not your typical things." Subtle adjustments occurred throughout the remainder of the morning. Gang members kept their distance but kept a close eye on her. Their cautious regard now blended with their observation. Jenny, looking worried, brought coffee to the security office. She said, "They're saying you have military training, that you are an undercover agent of some sort. Everyone in the town is talking." Emma sipped her coffee, shifting her weight to make herself look more powerful. "Jenny, conspiracy ideas are popular. Particularly with obese security officers who are fortunate in combat. They'll find something else to talk about in a week." However, Emma observed that the gang's habits had evolved as she went around. Their moves indicated they were acquiring substantial intelligence, and their surveillance had become more professional. She observed Ray Smoke Peters questioning mall staff about her history and Jake Gear Miller taking pictures of her car's license plate through the security cameras. An old contact's message chimed on her phone. "They are searching military databases for your fingerprints. Keep an eye out for specialized teams to arrive within 48 hours. Retaining her cautious facade of normalcy, Emma erased the message and went on patrol. After the altercation this morning, the gang's weapons business was too crucial for them to just leave. In an attempt to eradicate what they now perceived as a possible danger, they would react with increasing force. As she scanned for surveillance and assisted an elderly man with his shopping bags, she thought, let them come. Letting them believe they had to kill a witness was sometimes the greatest method to reveal a criminal organization. The Hellhound Hand was about to discover why she had been nicknamed Ghost for her previous task. It wasn't that she was difficult to locate, rather, it was too late by the time you noticed she was pursuing you. She saw 3 unmarked cars with out-of-state license plates in the parking lot. Although they sat in military position, the observers inside were dressed in ordinary attire. The real game was about to start since the gang was requesting outside assistance. Emma closed her shop and waved to Mrs. Chen, grinning a little. She had kept up her disguise for 15 years, finding solace in anonymity and routine. But she sensed the same steely focus coming back as she watched Logan oversee the entrance of what looked like tactical specialists. Sometimes the best camouflage was to blend in with your surroundings so your adversaries would believe they understood exactly what they were up against. The Hellhound Hand was about to learn why it was best to leave certain spirits alone. As Emma drove to work, dawn painted Horizon Valley in shades of gray, her trained eyes spotting 3 distinct cars in discrete observation positions. Professional operators who know how to blend in with suburban surroundings while still providing flawless coverage of their target had been brought in by the Hellhound Hand. There were additional surprises at the retail parking lot. Overnight, 4 brand new maintenance vans had shown up, their uniformly spaced parking and generic logos suggested strategic placement rather than real repairs. Emma observed that their sight lines appeared totally innocent to onlookers, although they covered all important exits. Jack had already arrived at the security office, looking worried as he went over the footage from the previous night. Maintenance said it will take a few days to receive components after the loading dock camera went down around 3 in the morning. Emma viewed the final video that was captured prior to the blackout. Convenient timing. Are there any deliveries planned for when the power goes out? Jack gestured to the logbook and said, "That's the thing. I've never heard of any of the 3 new suppliers that have been added to the nighttime schedule, but their paperwork appears to be flawless." Emma was able to identify the pattern: professional falsification of papers to conceal nocturnal activity. As she had anticipated, the gang was increasing the movement of their weapons while making use of the mall's infrastructure. Unbiddenly, the recollection came to light of another operation years prior in which her squad had been ambushed with identical paperwork. With his final remarks serving as a cautionary tale about approaching the truth too closely, Captain Rodriguez had perished while defending their withdrawal. Emma ignored the recollection and concentrated on the immediate danger. As she passed the cafe, she noticed Jenny, who was making Emma's usual coffee with a carefully bland expression. "Last night," she whispered, "we had new customers. 4 men with military haircuts who were attempting to pass like civilians asked a lot of questions about your routines and timetable." Emma moved carefully as she added sugar to her coffee. "Do they make any specific mentions?" "They pretended to be old friends who wanted to surprise you, but the way they moved and observed everything made me think of my brother's battalion in Afghanistan." Subtle indications of surveillance appeared in the morning. Radio communication surged on frequencies preferred by professional security teams each time Emma passed a repair vehicle. During her rounds, the new customers moved too purposefully, their carefree browsing concealing keen observation of her moves. Logan Viper Wilson showed up with 2 males Emma didn't recognize around 10:15 a.m. Their eyes displayed the measured evaluation of seasoned operators, and their business clothes were unable to conceal their military demeanor. As they passed her station, one of the suits said, "Quite the professional operation you run here. Very outstanding security covering, as if it had been developed by someone with tactical knowledge." Emma continued to play the part of the industrious but unimpressive security officer. "Sir, I'm only doing my job. The key to mall security is being meticulous." He never saw the smirk on the second suit's face. "Yes, precisely, paying attention to details, such as spotting things that shouldn't be seen. Dangerous behavior under the improper conditions." It was a subtle but obvious threat. These were trained professionals telling her to back off, not gang members trying to intimidate her. Under their pricey suits, Emma's mind instinctively catalogued tactical positions and weapon bulges as her old battle reflexes awoke. There was a warning of its own when Chief Ross arrived at midday. His nonchalant manner belied his deep concern when he located her close to the fountain. He replied softly, "I got some interesting reports about what happened last night. Professional teams, several cars, the kind of enterprise that has no place in a community like Horizon Valley. Do you have anything to share with me?" Emma observed the oddly professional efficiency with which a maintenance guy installed new cameras. "Chief, nothing specific. Just a few new companies are approaching local security with great care. Ross's face conveyed that he recognized the true meaning. Federal agencies have called us. They are highly interested in the growth of our local businesses, especially any large-scale distribution activities. Emma remarked, malls have good distribution infrastructure. Multiple entry points, loading docks, and storage spaces make it ideal for any company trying to transport goods quickly. Careful caution was in the chief's next comments. Interference is not taken lightly by these individuals. Be cautious in all you're doing and witnessing. It's best to bury some ghosts. His choice of words made Emma's lips quiver a little. Chief, ghosts tend to show up when they're needed. Sometimes that's precisely what's needed to reveal what's concealed in plain view. There were more indications of escalation in the afternoon. In coordination with the surveillance teams, Ray Smoke Peters created a coverage pattern that implied readiness for an operation of some sort. Emma observed that they looked closely at her car, probably with the intention of following her around after work. Another alert from her military contact buzzed through her phone. A team of specialists is coming. These contractors aren't your typical ones. Keep an eye out for former Special Forces personnel who have a lot of wet work experience. Emma observed Jake Gear Miller overseeing the unloading of big crates during a convenient power outage via the security cameras. The coordination of the operation was too expert for routine smuggling. Serious weapons that wouldn't be included in any valid shipping manifesto were being transported. Logan was waiting by Emma's car at closing time, his easygoing demeanor concealing his excellent tactical placement. Despite their refined appearance, the two suits who flanked him gave the impression that they were prepared for bloodshed. "You have an interesting background," Logan said. "Your history is filled with holes." There are times when Emma Blake seems to vanish entirely. Makes people wonder who they're actually interacting with. Emma changed her weight, allowing her size to convey fragility instead of muscularity. "There's not much to wonder about. I am merely carrying out my duties as a security guard." There was no humor in the first suit's laugh. "Ms. Blake, nobody is simply anything. Not security officers, in particular, who act like Special Forces officers when they believe no one is looking." Logan went on, "We're going to talk in more detail soon. In a quiet setting where we can truly talk about your intriguing skill set and what you may have observed while conducting your extremely comprehensive security patrols." Emma understood the threat that was implied. They intended to transport her to a location for more intense questioning. These individuals were skilled at making people vanish and making fatalities appear natural or unintentional. She said, looking forward to it, her smile revealing just enough of her own self to cause them to pause. "Enjoy professional conversations regarding security operations at all times." On the way home, 4 different surveillance cars were still in operation. Emma employed a calculated approach, giving them the impression that she was trying to be discreet while in fact watching their patterns of coordination. Because they were seasoned operatives, they would have tactical support and backup squads close by. Emma was in her apartment making dinner and going over her notes in her head. The gang's weapons program involved specialists who often worked for private military contractors or government agencies, and it was larger than first thought. Her phone displayed one last message. "Tomorrow, a confirmed wet work crew will arrive. When governments need issues resolved once and for all, they hire these serious operators." Though her mind was already formulating counter-strategies, Emma erased the message and went about her evening routine. The Hellhound Hand was going to find out why she was nicknamed Ghost by her former unit. Not only was she capable of vanishing, but she also had a tendency to show up precisely where and when her adversaries least expected her to. Outside, she could see 2 security cars keeping watch on her building. Violence cloaked in plausible deniability would be the norm tomorrow. Expert operators make sure there are no witnesses or proof. They believed they were interacting with a security guard who had discovered something too significant. As she got ready for bed, Emma grinned a little. Letting your adversaries believe they have total control of the issue might occasionally be the most successful tactic. She had to give them the impression that she was besieged before the Hellhound Hand could discover why some spirits were best left alone. Emma Blake was prepared to remind some extremely dangerous individuals why she had gained her name in Special Forces as the game entered its most perilous phase. Her peaceful Horizon Valley life was about to take a significant turn for the worse. At 2:47 a.m., the attack occurred. Emma had been lying in what appeared to be slumber, her body calm yet ready for it. Her trained ear picked up 3 different sounds. The soft click of weapons being prepared, the whisper of tactical boots on carpet, the faint scrape of a lockpick. She had to admit that they were good. They entered almost silently and moved through her apartment with expertly timed precision. Using night vision and hand signals, for operators carried out what was supposed to appear to be a violent robbery gone awry. Emma stayed still and regulated her breathing, using sound to determine their locations. She had flashed over the memories of similar operations. In how many instances had she been on the opposing side, taking out targets who didn't anticipate their demise? However, these operators were unaware that the person they were pursuing had penned the guide to their strategies. The initial assailant had no idea what had hit him. Emma's seemingly sleeping figure turned into a blur of precise movement as he turned the corner of the bedroom doorway. Her weight, which is frequently used to portray her as innocuous, propelled her forward with skillful force. Before his colleagues could respond, the operator was rendered unconscious by a swift blow to the throat and a precise hip throw. Before Emma's elbow could reach the nerve cluster in his shoulder, the second guy was able to raise his weapon. Her size concealed the skill of her blows. She was careful to falter a little so they could see what they were expecting. Getting extremely lucky is a security guard who has had some basic self-defense instruction. One of them snarled, his voice expressing professional awareness, "She's got training. It's not just any random." As Emma's awkward retreat turned into a flawless series of blows, each expertly crafted to appear inexperienced while precisely striking the correct pressure spots, his warning was cut off. With his weapon clattering away unfired, the operator fell. The most dangerous of the 4 men was the 4th. She could see the pause in his motions, the way he adapted to her seeming mannerisms. This individual had extensive experience in close combat. He launched a methodical, inquisitive attack, searching for flaws in her methodology. With her weight making her appear awkward and slow, Emma gave him precisely what he wanted. She supposedly exposed her back when she stumbled over a chair. The operator moved in for a deadly strike that would have worked on an amateur after falling for the bait. Instead, a throw that appeared much more awkward than it actually was turned his skillful technique against him, sending him hurtling into the air. Emma kept her cover even in the midst of combat, making sure to look exhausted as she incapacitated him. Less than 2 minutes had passed during the entire altercation. In her apartment, 4 experienced operators lay unconscious, their gear and weapons indicating extensive tactical training. Emma made sure to sound scared and perplexed as she contacted the police right away. When Chief Ross showed in, she shook her voice and said, "They broke in. After the death of my husband, I just enrolled in some self-defense training. I never imagined that I would need any of it at all." With his seasoned eyes, Ross scanned the area, picking up on details that didn't quite fit Emma's account. Although the operator's wounds demonstrated skill much above simple self-defense, they had been meticulously designed to preserve plausible deniability. He reiterated slowly that there must have been a self-defense instructor. Nervously, Emma let her bulk shift. "I suppose I was fortunate." Once more, they had no expectation that someone my size would defend themselves. Careful caution was in the chief's next comments. This week's 4th lucky break. With several federal agencies recently showing interest in our area, people may begin to ask why we've been so lucky. Emma's phone rang with Jenny's frantic message before she could reply. At the mall, they are unloading a large item. Professional teams and strict security. This isn't your typical product. Emma recognized the shipment of guns. The goal of the assassination attempt had been to prepare the ground for a significant operation. Through the window, she saw two unmarked cars keeping watch over her flat. The group was observing her reaction to their first real attempt to get rid of her. "Chief," she murmured softly. "Tonight, you might want to have units watch the mall. There might be some intriguing deliveries on the way." Ross looked at her for a while. "Like those deliveries where too many questions can result in death?" "Just like that." Slowly, the chief nodded. "Reports of strange activity have already been received. Several cars and expert security personnel. The sort of business that has no place in a community like Horizon Valley." Jenny's subsequent message to Emma was more urgent. "They are inquiring about your background and personal life." Logan arrived with a group of serious-looking individuals. Said that a security vulnerability needed to be fixed before morning. The memories struck with a jolt. Years before, during another mission, her crew had fallen into a trap as a result of asking questions. In her arms, Captain Rodriguez was bleeding out, his final words serving as a warning about the consequences of approaching the truth too closely. After that, she quit the service because she couldn't handle another mission where politics and power muddled morality. However, that line had returned to haunt her, endangering both her new life and the people she had vowed to defend. Emma observed through her window as one of the surveillance cars stealthily followed Ross's patrol car as it drove off. In search of leverage, the gang was pursuing everyone who had any connection to her. For the last time, her phone buzzed. Confirmed shipment of major weapons. The kind of military-grade equipment that shifts the balance of power. The procedure tonight is only the first step. After deleting the message, Emma started getting ready for the next step. She had been able to obtain intelligence while looking innocuous by disguising herself as the unremarkable security guard. The stakes had shifted, though. Serious operators who wouldn't stop until they removed all possible threat to their operation had been brought to Horizon Valley by the Hellhound Hand. Emma saw 3 additional unmarked cars occupying monitoring positions outside her apartment window. The gang was intensifying, bringing in additional experts to handle what they now understood to be a significant issue. They believed that after their failed assassination attempt, she would realize she was out of her element and retreat. Rather, it had validated all of her suspicions regarding their operation. The caliber of their operators and the degree of their responsiveness. This was more than merely the trafficking of firearms. This was a more significant operation that required training and resources at the level of the government. Emma started making preparations cautiously, trying to look like a scared woman as her mind prepared retorts. Letting them believe they had to kill a witness was sometimes the greatest method to reveal a large-scale scheme. She was going to find out why her former squad had given her the nickname. Not because she vanished, but rather because she was prone to showing up precisely where and when her adversaries least expected her to. Emma was getting ready for her shift at the mall as the sun rose over Horizon Valley. The monitoring teams saw exactly what they had anticipated as she moved with purposeful weight. An obese security guard who had been fortunate enough to avoid skilled operators. Beneath her well-preserved exterior, however, the icy concentration of combat preparedness had returned. Her peaceful existence was about to take a significant turn for the worse. She had to first give her adversaries the impression that they understood her. Letting your opponents think they were in total control of the situation was sometimes the best tactic. It was time for the Hellhound Hand to discover that certain spirits were best left alone. They had to believe they had her cornered first, though. Emma Blake was prepared to remind some extremely dangerous individuals why she had gained her name in Special Forces as the game entered its most perilous phase. Whether there would be violence was not the question. It was about safeguarding the innocent individuals caught in the crossfire while making sure the correct targets were revealed. When Emma came for her morning shift, the loading dock at the mall was bustling with unusual activity. A cordon constructed by personnel in maintenance clothes was far too formal for ordinary delivery workers, and 3 unmarked trucks had positioned themselves to effectively obstruct most camera viewpoints. As he interacted with the security forces, Emma observed Jake Gear Miller overseeing the operation, his actions displaying military efficiency. By ostensibly casual observation, she was able to identify 12 operators scattered over the region, each of whose placements created overlapping fields of fire while seeming entirely innocent to onlookers. It brought to light a previous operation from years ago in which the movement of specialist weaponry had been concealed by similar delivery patterns. By the time the target discovered they were being followed, 3 civilians had been killed in that mission. As she made her morning rounds, Emma ignored the thought and concentrated on keeping her cover. As she walked past the security office, she noticed Jack. Last night, loading dock cameras failed once more. Something doesn't feel right, but maintenance claims it's electrical interference. Emma pointed out that the vehicle positions in the final video before the blackout resembled those of typical military convoy formations. Do these fresh deliveries have shipping manifests? The strange thing is that Jack gave her a pile of documents. The documentation is flawless. Too ideal. As if someone knew just what to put in what place. Their chat was cut off by the sound of glass smashing. The trained ear of Emma picked up on the pattern. Deliberate distraction, not mishap or vandalism. She saw 2 of the delivery teams using the chaos to transport big crates via the service corridor via the surveillance cams. Emma's radio crackled with Jenny's voice. I need assistance at the cafe. Scenario with the customer. Emma moved with cautious urgency once they came up with a code phrase. As Logan, Viper, Wilson, and one of the suited operators from yesterday's assassination attempt engaged in what seemed to be a routine business meeting, she saw Jenny at her counter, her nonchalant demeanor concealing actual terror. Oh, our loyal security officer. Predatory amusement was evident in Logan's smirk. Just talking about some fascinating security camera footage from your community. There was a lot of excitement last night. The man in the suit examined Emma with a professional eye. One unruly security guard subdues 4 armed robbers. Amazingly fortunate. People sometimes underestimate the power of adrenaline and terror. With a nervous mass shift, Emma answered. They also didn't anticipate opposition. A surprise element. Surprise, indeed. Like learning that someone isn't exactly who they seem to be, the suit nodded gently. Makes people anxious, particularly when there are important commercial interests at stake. Jenny scrubbed her counter, her hands trembling a little. Emma observed the arrangement of Logan's entourage at the cafe. Too many patrons are sitting motionless and paying too much attention. Talking about business, Logan added. Jenny just shared some fascinating insights regarding recent delivery. She seems to have a keen eye for detail. His nonchalant tone betrayed a menace that Emma knew existed. They were assessing Jenny's level of knowledge and what she should do after she saw something she shouldn't have. Merely carrying out my duties. Jenny's tone remained calm. Customer service entails being attentive. His eyes never met the suit's smile. Yes, maybe we could have this conversation in a more private setting. Attention to detail is important to our organization. As Emma observed the operators posing as customers exchanging subtle hand signals, her battle instincts began to rise. They were getting ready to transport Jenny to a questioning location. The type of interrogation from which many never returned. She saw Ray Smoke Peters coordinating with additional security troops through the cafe windows. Beginning with those closest to Emma, the gang started eliminating possible witnesses under the guise of the weapons delivery. Emma really cut her off so she could wait for command attention. Jenny, I need your assistance with some security documentation. All vendors must update their emergency contacts in accordance with new insurance standards. The suit's face demonstrated that he understood the nature of her involvement. Insurance can wait. This is a rather serious business issue. Emma shifted slightly, keeping up her act of innocuous authority but utilizing her heft to covertly deny them access to Jenny. Mall rules regarding vendor documentation are extremely stringent. You are aware of how crucial attention to detail is. Professional operators recognize the tactical moves beneath Emma's seemingly awkward pose, and the tension stretched like piano wire. Emma had already noticed the bulge of a concealed handgun on Logan's jacket, and his hand moved slightly in that direction. Chief Ross's words echoed around the mall's atrium, and the moment broke. There was a significant amount of delivery activity this morning. Permits may need to be checked. Emma observed Logan's crew seamlessly transition from possible violence to light-hearted conversation. He stood, the suit's smile unwavering. "We'll talk about this more later," he informed Jenny. "Your insights regarding our company procedures are really helpful. Tell us about everything you've observed." Words like confinement and cleanup, which Emma heard in passing as they were leaving, had a sinister connotation for her. She observed additional skilled operatives arriving through the security cameras, their motions indicating extensive tactical training. "Aren't they going to murder me?" Jenny's voice hardly made a sound. "No, they're not," Emma said, her voice full of the assurance that comes with years of fighting. "However, you must describe what you witnessed in detail." Jenny poured coffee with trembling hands. "They're shifting crates. Some of the marks are familiar from my brother's time in the military. These aren't typical products or motorcycle parts. They are collaborating with a powerful individual who has ties to the government." Emma's military contact buzzed a message on her phone. Multiple agencies confirmed high-level involvement and significant political ramifications. "Keep an eye out for cleaners to arrive within a day." Emma watched through the surveillance monitors as Jake Gear-Miller coordinated with newcomers, individuals whose demeanor suggested the type of specialized training utilized by wet work teams sanctioned by the government. The type of operators that maintained flawless deniability while making issues vanish forever. As she finished her rounds, Chief Ross discovered her, his face solemn. "Have you received any intriguing calls from federal agencies? It looks like there has been a lot of interest in our local company development. The kind of publicity that kills people." Emma observed how Ross's travels were monitored by the gang's surveillance squads, who kept a list of everyone who might have too much information. "Chief, there are a lot of new faces around town. Faces of professionals. Like the experts who attempted to murder you last night." Ross's tone conveyed deliberate meaning. "The kind with government-grade gear and tactical training?" Jack's voice crackled on the radio before Emma could reply. "Several cars pulling into the cargo dock. These men, but more deliveries. They're not the same. Military distinct." Through the cams, Emma observed inconspicuous vans pulling up, displacing groups of operators whose moves demonstrated a level of training not found in civilian organizations. The Hellhound Hand was getting stronger, bringing in significant resources to fix possible security breaches. Her thoughts replayed the final words spoken by Captain Rodriguez. Biggest dangers might occasionally disguise themselves as friends. After that mission, she had quit the army because she couldn't handle another operation where politics and power would conflate right and wrong. However, that line had now discovered her once more, endangering not only her cover but also innocent bystanders who had been caught in the crossfire. They had to move before their operation was completely established because Jenny's discovery had expedited their timeframe. One last buzz sounded on Emma's phone. Teams of wet workers were sent. Complete approval for the cleanup effort. Collateral damage is allowed for anybody involved in a possible leak. As Emma weighed her alternatives, the sun rose higher above Horizon Valley. Her disguise as the ordinary security guard had allowed her to obtain intelligence, but now it was endangering other people. Professional cleaners, the type of operators who permanently solved issues while preserving flawless deniability, had been brought in by the Hellhound Hand. Letting your adversaries believe they have total control of the issue might occasionally be the most successful tactic. However, Emma became aware that the game had altered as she saw more tactical teams arrive. Now, exposing their business wasn't the only goal. The goal was to shield innocent individuals from the kind of cleanup that left no trace or witnesses. Playing the innocuous security guard was coming to an end. The Hellhound Hand was going to discover why Emma Blake had gained her name in special forces and why some ghosts were best left alone. Whether there would be violence was not the question. It was about safeguarding people caught in the midst while making sure the right targets were exposed. Following several monitoring teams through the security cameras gave Emma's morning ritual at Sunrise Mall a new sense of urgency. The loading dock had been turned into a professional operations center by the Hellhound Hand, with their tactical teams maintaining flawless coverage and seeming to go about their daily business as usual. Jenny's voice was hardly audible above a whisper as she poured coffee in the deserted cafe, her hands shaking. "Last night, they followed me home. Professional teams are keeping an eye on everyone who is connected to you, just as you warned." Emma saw 3 new observation posts through the cafe windows. The operators' relaxed stances concealed ideal placement for quick reaction, displaying the kind of patience that comes from intense tactical training. Silently, Emma said, "Pack a bag. Tell your brother to expect company, nothing too obvious." Jenny had mentioned her brother's military duty, she recalled, the kind of background that would have meant what his sister had seen. It brought to mind the last operations of Captain Rodriguez, the speed at which expert observers could turn into execution squads at the drop of a hat. As Logan Viper Wilson and 2 additional operators entered the mall, Emma ignored the thought and concentrated on the current danger. These muscles weren't typical. When governments required information extracted swiftly and permanently, they hired personnel with specialized expertise in close protection and questioning, as evidenced by their movements. With a somber expression, Chief Ross stopped her close to the security office. "I learned some fascinating details regarding our latest business venture. Some highly classified sources provided the files." Emma observed how the monitoring teams seemed uninterested and adapted to follow their talk. "Chief, is there anything really noteworthy?" "A good deal. There are some intriguing gaps in some military records, the kind of gaps that suggest someone very special was involved in some very sensitive operations," Ross said in a hushed voice. Mrs. Chen's anxious voice crackled through the radio before Emma could reply. "Shop and customer situations require security." Emma started to move cautiously quickly after hearing the code phrase. Marcus Enville Thompson and one of the new operators were cornering Mrs. Chen, their casual attitudes belying the seriousness of their queries. Marcus grinned, but his eyes never met the smile, just talking about some interesting cargo. It appears that several cartons with extremely precise markings were routed through Mrs. Chen's storage space. Emma positioned herself carefully, keeping her cover as the helpful security guard and blocking their subtle intimidation with her size. "Mrs. Chen, is everything well here?" The old store owner's voice faltered yet remained steady. "In violation of mall rules, they seek access to my private storage. We are properly authorized." As part of a government inquiry for possible customs offenses, the operator provided official-looking documentation. With purposeful slowness, Emma went over the paperwork, pointing out that their surveillance teams had set up ideal coverage of all the exits. "You understand that mall management policy must be used to verify these?" Professional appreciation was evident in the operator's smile. "Of certainly, but when national security is at stake, policies occasionally need to be modified." Emma watched as Jake Gearmiller coordinated with extra tactical squads via the security cameras. By using their delivery of weapons as a pretext to kill possible witnesses, the gang was setting up resources for a significant operation. The threat in Mrs. Chen's voice was carefully concealed. "Tonight, they're using the ancient service tunnels to move something. Something significant enough to attract these experts." Emma saw the danger in the operator's posture. Mrs. Chen has just divulged too much information regarding their procedure. His hand shifted slightly in the direction of his jacket, where Emma had already observed the distinctive bulge of a weapon that had been suppressed. Emma actually cut him off, adjusting her weight to discreetly obstruct his view. "In order to comply with the new insura." NCE requirements for any unauthorized access attempts, Mrs. Chen must submit an incident report. As skilled operators identified the tactical maneuvers hidden beneath Emma's apparently awkward stance, the tension grew dangerously. She caught a glimpse of their surveillance teams beginning to remove residents from the area. When Jack's voice reached her radio, the moment broke. Serious hardware is arriving, and several cars are entering the loading dock. Emma observed the operator's body language, which conveyed annoyance at the halted operation through subtle cues. Though their faces indicated that it wouldn't be long, the cleanup would have to wait. With a tone that was obviously menacing, the operator informed Mrs. Chen, "We'll continue this discussion later. We really appreciate your help with our research." Emma overheard bits of their talk as they were leaving. Guidelines for surveillance teams to stay under observation and get ready for more intense questioning once their original mission was finished. "Aren't they going to murder us all?" Like the other witnesses they are referring to, Mrs. Chen's voice trembled. Emma's military contact buzzed a message on her phone. Wetwork teams were confirmed to have been dispatched, the cleanup operation was fully sanctioned, and several targets were selected for prompt resolution. Emma observed Ray Smoke Peters coordinating with fresh arrivals and specialized teams whose equipment indicated they were ready for serious interrogation of possible security threats through the security feeds. As she finished her rounds, Chief Ross located her, his face indicating that he had come to some challenging conclusions. "I came across some intriguing documents regarding a Special Forces operative, a specialist in uncovering illegal activities with top-level government protection. Someone who vanished following a failed mission." Emma observed how Ross's movements were monitored by the gang's monitoring, designating him as yet another possible danger that needed to be removed. "Many people go missing, Chief. Sometimes all they seek is a more peaceful existence. Even so, tranquil lives can occasionally find them. Especially when they notice things they shouldn't, things that get people killed," Ross said thoughtfully. Jenny's voice came over her radio with hardly disguised terror before Emma could reply. "At every exit, they are moving in professional teams. No one is allowed to leave." As tactical teams set up control stations across the mall, Emma observed through the cameras. The subtlety of the Hellhound Hand was used. In preparation for a significant cleanup effort, they were securing the area. Captain Rodriguez's final words reverberated in the mind. "The adversaries with the friendliest clothes can occasionally be the most threatening." After that mission, she had quit the army because she couldn't handle another operation where politics and power would conflate right and wrong. However, that statement had now returned to haunt her, posing a threat to innocent people who had been entangled in her research. The importance of the gang's weapons operation outweighed the risk of being discovered. Anyone who might have seen or heard too much would be eliminated. One last buzz sounded on Emma's phone. "Teams of interrogation are present. Permission to apply the most pressure possible to determine the scope of the security violation. Collateral damage is unrestricted." As Emma weighed her alternatives, the sun rose above Horizon Valley. Her disguise as the ordinary security guard had done its job, but now it was endangering other people. Professional cleaners, the type of operators who permanently removed loose ends while retaining flawless deniability, had been brought in by the Hellhound Hand. Playing the innocuous security guard was coming to an end. By forcing her hand, these operators threatened innocent people whose only transgression was being perceptive. The Hellhound Hand was going to discover why Emma Blake had gained her name in Special Forces and why some ghosts were best left alone. Letting your adversaries believe they have total control of the issue might occasionally be the most successful tactic. However, Emma saw that the game had shifted as more strategic teams managed to secure them all. Now, safeguarding innocent people from the kind of cleanup that left no witnesses or proof was more important than simply exposing their operation. Whether there would be violence was not the question. It concerned how to save individuals caught in the crossfire while making sure the proper targets were revealed. Horizon Valley was at war because of the Hellhound Hand. We needed to demonstrate to them why some opponents were better off not being challenged. Emma used many camera feeds to keep an eye on the tactical squads of the Hellhound Hand, while the mall's security office served as her command center. They established control points in a logical and professional manner while keeping things seeming like regular business. Jack, who did not completely comprehend the significance of the patterns he was seeing, reported that the east entry was clear. But those fresh crews for maintenance? Their equipment appears to be malfunctioning. Emma observed how all of the main entrances were under the authority of the maintenance crew's cars. Their equipment wasn't typical repair gear. It was specialist tactical equipment that was disguising itself as civilian property. She observed Logan Viper Wilson coordinating with his skilled operatives via the cafe windows. Instead of ongoing observation, their hand gestures and movement patterns indicated quick action. The cleaning process was beginning. Jenny's brother showed up just in time, his military demeanor evident despite his regular attire. Emma knew his kind right away. He would be able to comprehend exactly what he was seeing with the support of special forces, most likely Rangers. With his eyes following the tactical squads, he whispered to Jenny, "Those aren't normal contractors. That is top-tier, military-grade equipment that shouldn't be in the hands of civilians." Through the cams, Emma saw Ray Smoke Peters recognize the newcomer and promptly notify the observation crews. They would be able to spot military training, which is another possible danger that needs to be removed. They started their initial phase of operations at the loading dock. The arrival of 3 inconspicuous vans revealed teams of experts with technology that suggested they were skilled in enhanced interrogation. Everyone who had seen their weapons shipments would be on their target list. Through Emma's radio, Mrs. Chen's voice crackled, tense with repressed panic. "The professionals you warned about are here, and they have very precise questions." Despite Emma's cautious hurry, the interrogation team arrived at Mrs. Chen's shop before Emma did. Their leader provided official-looking credentials while wearing a suit that barely covered his tactical gear. His smile conveyed practiced intimidation. "Federal investigation," he said with ease. "I need to talk about a few erratic shipments that come through your storage facility." Emma took careful stance, keeping her cover while blocking their subtle intimidation with her size. Due to recent problems with false documentation, mall security measures require that all federal credentials be verified. His eyes never met the interrogator's smile. Of course, even though urgent national security issues occasionally call for alterations to standard protocols. Emma observed additional tactical teams guarding the mall's perimeter via the security feeds. Their deployment patterns indicated that they were ready for real action, the kind that culminated in mishaps that were completely debatable and without witnesses. The timing of Chief Ross's arrival was intriguing, given our discussion of certain military documents, and there were rumors that federal officials were interviewing him. Emma observed that the gang's surveillance instantly changed to follow Ross's whereabouts. "Chief, there are some intriguing gaps in those records." "The gaps that point to someone very special," Ross said thoughtfully. "Someone with expertise in revealing high-level protection operations, the kind of protection that makes issues go away forever." Jenny's terrified voice came over her radio before Emma could reply. "Private security contractors with federal credentials are being questioned. Nobody is returning." As the interrogation teams started to separate possible witnesses, Emma observed through the cameras. They used well-coordinated, professional techniques that produced believable justifications for separating individuals for routine interviews that would have quite different outcomes. Similar operations memories came to the surface. How fast, once the order was given, questioning might turn into elimination. As she took notice of the tactical team's deployment patterns, Emma ignored the thought and concentrated on taking immediate action. A message from her military contact buzzed through her phone. Teams authorized to conduct interrogations under extreme pressure. The cleanup effort was extended to all possible witnesses. Collateral damage is unrestricted. Emma observed Jake Gearmiller working with new arrivals and specialist teams whose equipment implied competence in making individuals disappear while preserving flawless deniability by watching the security feeds. One of the weapons shipments went awry, and the crisis worsened. Emma saw heated movement patterns among the tactical units and an increase in radio activity. They had to speed up their chronology since something had frightened them. Jack said that several cars were observing the cameras from County Road. Not what they usually do for transportation. Something is rattling them. Emma could see the warning signs of a botched operation. How easily preparations might be derailed and professional composure turned to hazardous desperation. Instead of taking the chance of exposure, the Hellhound Hand would instantly erase possible witnesses. The threat in Mrs. Chen's voice was carefully concealed. The old service tunnels are being used to move something. Something that worries these experts a lot. Emma noticed a change in the interrogator's demeanor as she realized Mrs. Chen had disclosed too much information about their operation. His hand made a little movement in the direction of his concealed weapon. Emma actually stopped shifting her weight to get out of his line of fire. Every vendor interview must be securely recorded. Recent modifications to the policy. As skilled operators identified the tactical maneuvers hidden beneath Emma's apparently awkward stance, the tension grew dangerously. She could see in her peripheral vision that their squads had begun evacuating the area of civilians. Explosions reverberated from the loading dock, shattering the moment. The shipment of weapons had gone horribly wrong, and the Hellhound Hand had to change from a little cleanup to quick action. Secure every exit. As he communicated with his tactical teams, Logan's tone was urgent. Until the situation is under control, nobody departs. Anyone who has witnessed too much becomes an issue that needs to be resolved right away. One last buzz sounded on Emma's phone. Teams of wet workers will be sent out right away to clean up. Collateral damage was deemed acceptable by all witnesses. Maximum force is fully sanctioned. Emma was weighing her options as the sun cast long shadows through the skylights in the mall. She had been able to obtain intelligence by disguising herself as the ordinary security guard, but now she was endangering innocent people. Professional cleaners, the type of operators who permanently solved difficulties, had been brought in by the Hellhound Hand. Everything changed when the loading dock exploded for the first time. Through security cameras, Emma saw the meticulously planned operation of the Hellhound Hand dissolve into barely restrained chaos. There was a problem with the supply of firearms. Completely incorrect. Jack's voice was tight with confusion as he reported, 3 men down, over her radio. A mishap involving the delivery trucks. These guys aren't behaving like typical maintenance personnel. Emma kept tabs on many tactical groups gathering at the loading zone. Even in times of crisis, their actions demonstrated professional restraint. These were skilled operators carrying out backup plans, not frantic crooks. Near the cafe, Jenny noticed David, her brother. He assessed the situation and noted threats and exits with military accuracy, demonstrating his ranger training. Crowd control isn't something that regular contractors do. They are carrying Delta-level equipment. Emma observed that 3 possible witnesses had already been segregated by the security contractors and led to the service corridors for standard interrogation. Their method was faultless, entirely legal, and appeared to eliminate security threats. Silently, Chief Emma whispered on her radio. It could be a good idea to have units available at every mall exit. Things are going to get tricky. Ross's reaction was prompt. Teams are already in place. I'm only awaiting your signal. Emma observed Logan Viper Wilson coordinating with his skilled operators via the security cameras. Instead of continuing to be subtle, their hand signals indicated that security threats should be eliminated immediately. Their hand had been forced by the explosion. Through Emma's earpiece, Mrs. Chen's voice sent a dire warning. They are transporting military equipment through the former maintenance tunnels. Some of it was damaged in the blast. They're furious. Emma saw Mrs. Chen's shop being approached by the first damp work crew. 3 operators are moving with the level of accuracy that comes from years of experience in permanently resolving issues. They had their guns ready but hidden. Emma, feeling the familiar combat focus settle over her consciousness, said, "Time to earn your pay, old friend." Her mass was somehow silent as she passed through the damp work team's blind zones, so they never saw her approach. A precise nerve attack brought down the first operator. Silently, his unconscious figure caught and lowered. The second turned at the wrong time and struck the right pressure point with an elbow blow that appeared awkward. Before Emma's apparent misstep turned into a flawless takedown, the third was able to grab for his weapon. She let out a loud cry for observing bystanders, "My goodness! It appears like these males have passed out. The heat must be the cause." David's military expertise and his ability to spot professional combat skill beneath Emma's meticulous exterior drew her attention from across the atrium. She nodded slightly, and he started softly guiding individuals to evacuation routes that had been devised. Through an operator's dropped radio, Emma heard that the package was compromised. "Cleanup is permitted right away. Not a witness." The emergency exit of the mall abruptly closed. As the Hellhound Hand's tactical teams gained complete control, electronic locks engaged. Emma observed that they had set up snipers on the roof, using them as cover for the now absent maintenance staff. Through her encrypted line, Emma informed Chief Ross that it was time to cease playing. "Put your people in their proper places. It's going to get real soon." The chief's reaction was composed and professional. "SWATs are prepared. We only require a clear view of their command element from you." Emma's girth no longer obscured her powers, and she moved with purpose. As she approached the loading dock, 3 additional operators attempted to stop her. Their motions demonstrated a great deal of special operations experience, and their tactical training was superb. It was insufficient. Emma's seeming slip turned into a smooth series of blows, each one carefully placed to incapacitate without killing. The operatives fell swiftly, their lifeless bodies hidden to prevent civilians from becoming alarmed. Using the radio Ross had given him, David reported that the east side was clear. 8 civilians were relocated to safe areas. There is no doubt that these contractors have military training. Excellent quality. After years of planning, Emma was able to access the mall's maintenance controls, which she had meticulously laid out. The tactical team's night vision gear and communication gadgets were interfered with when emergency sprinklers went out in strategic locations. Logan's voice was one of irritated authority. "Track her down. There is now an immediate threat to the primary target. Maximum amount of force permitted." As she turned off another security squad, Emma grinned a little. Letting your adversaries believe they had you figured out until everything changed was sometimes the most successful tactic. She observed Jake Gear Miller coordinating with the other wet work crews via the surveillance cams. They were becoming increasingly frustrated. Overweight security guards were not accustomed to outmaneuvering professional operators. Through her earphone, Emma Jenny's voice was heard. "Something large is being moved through the lowest levels. Military containers containing sophisticated weapons and radioactive warnings." Her last task came back to her. Identical warnings, identical containers, and the cost of approaching the truth too closely. Emma, however, had prepared for every scenario this time. Had been training for just such an operation for years. "Chief," she said. "Prepare to relocate. Have your people take the loading dock when I sound the fire alarms." Although they are competent operators, they do not anticipate a coordinated police reaction. Professional gratitude was evident in Ross's response. "Like a ghost from the past. You've reviewed enough of the files to understand why you were called that ready at that time." As Emma got closer to the loading dock's control center, she disabled 2 more tactical teams. She had created the manual on their techniques and had taught operators like them before vanishing into civilian life, yet their training was evident in the way they moved and coordinated their strikes. Serious operators, the kind of experts who solved issues while preserving flawless deniability, had been delivered to Horizon Valley by the Hellhound Hand. However, they had committed a crucial error. Emma had protected innocent individuals from their threats. She watched as Logan rallied his surviving troops via the security cameras. The boss of the group was no idiot. He realized that his flawless operation was coming apart very fast. His hand signals to the tactical squad indicated that they should leave the compromised weaponry behind and make a fighting retreat right away. Every unit is prepared. According to Ross, SWATs were present. The FBI is waiting. I only ask that you open the door. Emma got to the loading dock controls with a small smile. Patience, waiting years for the right opportunity to strike, was sometimes the most powerful weapon. The Hellhound Hand was going to discover why it was best to let certain spirits unpunished. When Emma activated the emergency systems, the fire alarm shrieked to life. The sound of SWAT forces breaking through exterior doors was muffled by sprinklers being turned on throughout the mall. The tactical team's communications were disrupted by perfectly timed electrical surges, and their night vision equipment ignited and died. Ghost is on the prowl. They were able to hear the voice that had given other operators nightmares when Emma transmitted on their command frequency. Maybe you ought to have taken a closer look at those military documents. Logan received professional recognition for his response. There's a big issue here. Intel did not recommend target. Withdrawal right away is advised. Withdrawal was not an option, th. Oof. Emma had mapped out every area of the shopping center and taken control of every system in order to prepare for this moment for years. Her reputation in special forces was going to be revealed to the Hellhound Hand's skilled operatives. The days of pretending to be the innocuous security guard were past. These operators would now discover why it was preferable to leave certain opponents unopposed after forcing her hand. As police guarded the perimeter, Emma Blake stalked around the mall like a ghost, dispatching tactical squads with pinpoint efficiency. Letting your adversaries believe they have you figured out can sometimes be the most successful tactic. The Hellhound Hand was going to discover why certain security guards were best left alone and why some legends were founded in reality. As Emma's meticulously planned strategy came to fruition, the loading dock descended into controlled mayhem. While the Hellhound Hand's expert operators frantically guarded their arsenal of weapons, SWAT units broke through external doors. She saw Logan Viper Wilson yelling commands through security feeds, his military experience clearly visible in the way he immediately adjusted to the shifting circumstances. According to Ray Smoke Peters' tactical frequency, the target is moving. The mall's infrastructure is being used against us by her. There were several compromised access points. In order to prevent panic among the evacuated populace, Emma skillfully deactivated another security squad while concealing their unconscious forms. These were not your typical gangsters. Extensive special operations training was evident in their responses. David reported via her radio that the West Corridor was secured. Contained 6 of their operators. These people are operating really serious equipment, such as military prototype weapons, which are not commonplace. Emma followed many tactical teams gathering on the main weapons stash via the cams. Their actions gave the impression that they were more willing to delete evidence than to run the danger of being exposed. That implied explosives, most likely demolition charges of military grade. Get your personnel away from the loading dock, Chief, she said, disarming another operator. They will attempt to conceal this. Ross's reaction was prompt. I'm already retreating. Teams from the FBI are keeping an eye on external exits. Just need you to control them until the first demolition charge exploded, cutting off his speech. The expertly planned explosion was intended to obliterate the evidence while preserving plausible deniability. Emma observed how the tactical teams started their extraction by taking advantage of the disarray. All units must be withdrawn right away. Logan's voice was authoritative, with scorched earth procedures in place. No witnesses, no proof. As she approached the main control center and loading docks, Emma slipped through the haze with a lack of practice, her weight surprisingly silent. She was attempted to be intercepted by 2 operatives. Their perfect technique demonstrated years of training in close combat. It was insufficient. What appeared to be a stumble by Emma turned into a smooth series of blows. They are all specifically designed to disable without killing. The operators were soon brought down. They contributed their unconscious shapes to the expanding collection. Ghost verified on location. This isn't a security guard, according to one of the tactical team commanders. She is demonstrating combat skills at the Delta level. Emma's earphone carried Jenny's voice. They are transporting a customized weapons system of some sort through the lower maintenance tunnels. The containment unit sustained damage from the explosion. After years of planning, Emma was able to access the mall's environmental controls. Strategic activation of smoke extraction fans disrupted the tactical team's planned escape routes and cleared sight lines for police snipers. You have no idea what you're getting involved with. When Emma cornered Logan close to the weapon stockpile, his voice was respectful and professional. This goes much beyond trafficking in weapons or gang territory. There are those in positions of authority who don't tolerate failure. Emma said, "Oh, I know exactly what I'm dealing with," revealing to him the operator behind her security guard persona. The same players that orchestrated the Sarajevo training mishap, or perhaps the ones responsible for the Bangkok equipment breakdown. Logan's eyes were familiar. They said you were kicked out of Burma following that business, Ghost. Sometimes hiding in plain sight is the best option. Despite her stature, Emma moved gracefully and fluidly, blocking his escape routes. I should have taken a closer look at those secret files. She observed Jake Gearmiller coordinating with the other tactical teams via security feeds. Their actions indicated the arrival of significant support. The operators who dealt with issues that governments required to stop being there. Emma, Chief Ross's voice transmitted caution, bringing heavy weaponry in many vehicles close to professional squads. These assets are not local. Emma recalled similar activities from her past and confirmed that cleanup personnel were involved. Upstairs, our buddies dislike loose ends. Logan grinned grimly in comprehension. The depth of this is beyond your comprehension. The visible portion is the armaments. An entire infrastructure is being constructed. Deniable assets are private military troops. It is the sort of action that rewrites power dynamics. It always is. Two further operators who attempted to flank Emma's position were disabled. Different package, same players. Continuing to engage in government-approved activities under the guise of criminal organizations. Emma had already diverted the explosion through pre-planned routes when the second set of demolition charges exploded. Important evidence would be preserved while the explosion would have a stunning appearance. According to a tactical operator, the Sierra team was compromised. Target is exhibiting a deep understanding of our procedures. Encourage prompt withdrawal and sanitization of the site. As she activated the mall's fire suppression systems, Emma grinned a little. Patience was sometimes the most powerful weapon. Establishing the ideal position for years before striking. As Emma surrounded Logan close to the damaged weapons cache, Logan said, "You can't stop this. Cleaners will be sent, followed by cleaners for cleaners. The entire operation is made to be totally debatable." Emma responded, "That's what Burma was supposed to be," pointing out several tactical teams attempting to set up shooting positions. The amount of evidence that exists after years of meticulous planning to disclose it is astounding. David said more professional teams were coming in over her radio. These operators aren't typical ones. They are demonstrating tactical cooperation at the Delta level, akin to a specialist response unit. Incoming federal agencies, Ross continued. Several countries and advanced qualifications. Whatever you agitated, it's receiving a lot of attention. Through security feeds, Emma observed more tactical squads being disgorged by unmarked vehicles. Their gear and mannerisms pointed to government-approved wet work units, the kind of operators who could solve issues once and for all. Logan said, "This is your last chance to leave, in a tone that suggested he already knew the answer. These individuals not just neutralize hazards, they eradicate them entirely. No traces, no witnesses, no evidence. In Burma, they attempted that. Emma engaged another tactical squad while maintaining exact control over her maneuvers. The odd thing about ghosts is that they occasionally return expressly to haunt those who attempted to bury them. Another phase was unleashed by Emma's meticulously planned strategy, and the cargo dock exploded in renewed warfare. As FBI teams gathered evidence, police snipers blocked escape routes. Professional operators in the Hellhound clutches were stuck between several forces, compromising their flawless operation. One of the tactical team commanders reported promptly that the target is not standard opposition, demonstrating a deep understanding of classified protocols and recommending a rapid evacuation and site sanitization. However, Emma had been preparing for this moment for years. Every camera, system, and access point had been mapped and adjusted. Operators of the Hellhound Hands were going to discover why it was preferable to leave some opponents alone. Logan communicated on their command frequency, confirming the ghost protocols. Every unit disengages right away. One well-known Delta-level operator is target. Again, withdrawal is permitted immediately. As she observed their professional facade crumble, Emma grinned a little. Letting your adversaries believe they had you figured out until everything changed was sometimes the most successful tactic. Serious operators, the kind of experts who solved issues while preserving flawless deniability, had been delivered to Horizon Valley by the Hellhound Hand. However, they had committed a crucial error. In the area, they had threatened innocent people. Emma had been preparing to defend for years. It was time to demonstrate to them why Emma Blake had gained a reputation in special forces and why some ghosts were best left alone. Whether there would be violence was not the question. It was about safeguarding people caught in the crossfire while making sure the proper targets were revealed. Teams of operators whose gear and demeanor suggested direct government authority were disgorged by the black SUVs as they arrived in perfect formation. As Emma secured Logan in the loading dock's control room, she monitored their deployment via security feeds. These weren't your typical federal officers. The way they moved demonstrated the type of training that is only available to specialized confinement units. The package was compromised. Through the tactical frequency came a fresh voice. Verified ghost presence. Complete sanitization should be started. The voice was familiar to Emma. Everyone who knew too much about the Burma mission, including her old commanding officer, Colonel Richards, was buried. As she fastened Logan's cuffs, she said, "You really don't want to do this. It's not your buddies coming. Everything, including your entire organization, is to be cleaned up by them." There was no humor in Logan's laugh. "Do you believe the target is the Hellhound Hand? We are only the bit that is visible. The trafficking, the guns. It's all a front for something more significant. The building has been going on for years." Emma observed Richards working with his tactical squads through the webcams. Their equipment alluded to black operations units, the type of operators that dealt with issues that governments needed to eradicate entirely. "Chief," she said via her private channel. "Keep your people away from the outer ring. Jurisdiction and badges won't matter to these new gamers." Ross gave a somber reply. "These federal boys are not here to make arrests, but they are already retreating and the FBI is recording everything." Emma turned off the primary access systems for the loading dock, which she had planned for years. Careful planning had negated the containment team's tactical edge, rendering their high-tech equipment suddenly useless. According to one of Richard's operators, Target is deliberately thwarting containment procedures and demonstrating a deep understanding of secret systems. Before she became an issue that needed to be resolved, Richards responded, his voice full of reluctant respect, because she had contributed to the writing of those protocols. Emma's earphone carried Jenny's voice. "Through the repair tunnels, more teams are coming in. They have specific gear with them. It appears to be the same material used for site sanitization in my brother's unit. Emma recalled that equipment from her own operations, which was made to fully remove any evidence of what had actually occurred. However, she had been prepared for this situation for years. "Get the civilians to the designated evacuation points, David," she said. "Collateral damage won't matter to these cleanup staff." She observed Richard's squad deploying throughout the mall via security feeds. They appeared to have a great deal of tactical experience. These operators were experts in erasing issues while preserving absolute deniability. Logan remarked softly, "You still don't get it. The weapons operation and the Hellhound Hand are merely infrastructure. They are constructing a larger structure. Private armed troops, debatable resources, the sort of action that alters the balance of power." "Oh, I know exactly what they're constructing." While gathering important information, Emma looked at the surveillance feeds. They tried the same thing in Burma. Under the guise of criminal groups, private armies function outside of governmental oversight. With flawless tactical coordination, the first containment squad broke through the outer doors. Emma fought them effectively, her size masking the accuracy of her blows. These operators were not your typical ones. They displayed the type of training that only elite units receive. According to one operator, Ghost is aggressively interacting with containment units. Site sanitization is degraded while demonstrating combat expertise at the Delta level. As she turned off their tactical communications, Emma grinned a little. Preparation, which involved years of perfecting a position before striking, was sometimes the most powerful weapon. Chief Ross's voice was warning, "Emma. Federal agencies have arrived. Not these black ops dudes, but real ones. The cash for the firearms is being held by the FBI." Emma said, "Secure what you can," as she eliminated another tactical unit. "However, keep an eye on your people. Official law enforcement will be eliminated without hesitation by these cleanup crews." She saw Richards working with newcomers, men in fancy suits whose demeanor conveyed a sense of serious power, through the cameras. The type of individuals who issued commands that governments had to refuse. As Emma fastened him to a support pillar, Logan presented him final opportunity to go. These individuals not just neutralize hazards, they eradicate them entirely. Everyone you've protected and all you've developed here will go. In Burma, they attempted that. Emma engaged another containment team while maintaining exact control over her actions. The odd thing about ghosts is that they occasionally return expressly to haunt those who attempted to bury them. Across the tactical frequency, Richard's voice conveyed command authority. Every unit shifted to protocols for maximum force. Operational security has been compromised by target. Total sanitization is permitted. However, Emma had been preparing for this moment for years. Every camera, system, and access point had been mapped and adjusted. The containment teams were trapped in hallways that abruptly closed. Careful planning nullified their tactical advantages. As explosions reverberated around the loading dock, Logan said, "You're fighting a losing battle. You won't believe how high this goes. You are unaware of the existence of military commands, government agencies, and power structures." Emma responded, "That's what Burma was about," pointing out several tactical teams attempting to set up fire positions. The amount of evidence that exists after years of meticulous planning to disclose it is astounding. David reported the arrival of other specialized troops via her radio. These operators aren't typical ones. They are displaying some sort of black operations response team and specific confinement protocols. Through security feeds, Emma observed more tactical squads being disgorged by unmarked vehicles. Their apparatus betrayed a serious government power, the type of operators who dealt with issues that had to be resolved once and for all. Richards broadcast on the command radio that Ghost is violating containment procedures. Make the switch to scorched earth methods. There is no proof left. There are no more witnesses. However, Emma had anticipated this very situation. Her long-awaited reaction to the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation had come in the form of operators capable of revealing the entire plot. As she gathered the last piece of evidence, she informed Logan that sometimes the best defense is to let your adversaries believe they are in charge until everything changes. As Emma's meticulously planned strategy reached its last stage, the loading dock erupted in fresh fighting. While police forces kept the perimeter under control, FBI investigators gathered vital evidence. Teams tasked with containing Richards were stuck between opposing troops. Their flawless cleansing effort was totally undermined. Total operational security has been violated by Target. There was an urgent report from one of the tactical team commanders. There are current ghost protocols. Encourage site abandonment and withdrawal right away. Through the morning mist, 3 black vehicles sped, carrying men whose power emanated from unofficial levels of government. Emma stayed in the loading dock control room and watched security cams to follow their arrival. These authorities weren't your typical ones. Their stance and security information alluded to the type of authority that functioned outside the realm of ordinary supervision. Ghost, one last warning. Richard's tactical teams set up fire positions, and his voice carried professional menace. Get out of here. Personal vengeance is not the only operation. In an attempt to breach her position, Emma disabled another containment unit, adding their unconscious forms to the expanding collection. She said, seeing the newcomers via cameras, Burma wasn't about vengeance. Its purpose was to reveal the consequences of military force acting without responsibility. The first government representatives, men in pricey clothes with an air of total power, got out of their cars. Their security details established coverage while preserving perfect deniability, moving with the kind of accuracy that only comes from specialized training. Cleanup procedures are being deliberately compromised by Target. Before she became a liability that needed to be eliminated, Richard claimed, a tactical operator reported that she demonstrated extensive knowledge of classified procedures since she helped write those procedures. Emma's earphone carried Jenny's voice. They are using professional teams with heavy equipment to move into the civilian evacuation routes. These federal agents are not your typical ones. Similar groups, specialist organizations created to permanently eradicate issues while preserving flawless deniability, were reminiscent of Emma's own activities. However, she had been prepared for this situation for years. Get the civilians to secondary extraction points, David, she said. If these cleanup teams believe that causing collateral damage will assist keep the situation under control, they won't think twice about doing so. She observed the government officials meeting with Richards via security feeds. They appeared to be very concerned about the exposed operation based on their body language and hand signals. This type of worry typically resulted in the total sanitization of all witnesses and evidence. Through Emma's radio came the urgent warning of Mrs. Chen's voice. Through the repair tunnels, more teams are coming in. They have the same military-grade equipment that we observed in the weapons shipments. As they broke through the secondary entrance, Emma engaged another tactical unit. Their perfect proficiency demonstrated the kind of training that is only used for the most delicate government operations. However, she had spent years planning and had planned countermeasures. You have yet to grasp the broader picture. As his teams set up containment positions, guns, private armies, and other means of upholding order outside of established systems, Richards yelled. Working outside of the established channels, like you did with the artwork you took to Burma, is sometimes necessary for peace. As Emma disabled another operator, or the type that wiped out those witnesses in Bangkok, her motion stayed accurate. The government leaders authorized full force, and the loading port exploded in renewed conflict. They demonstrated the type of training that came from expertise in dark operations by moving their security details with deadly efficiency. Several confinement units are being actively engaged by Ghost. According to an operator, the deployment of specialized teams should be quickly recommended. Through Emma's encrypted link, Chief Ross's voice was heard. Critical evidence was obtained by the FBI, but these new players are displaying government credentials that I have never seen before. As other tactical teams spread out over the mall, Emma observed via webcams. Their gear, which was limited to government-approved extermination units, gave the impression that they were seriously in control. "You constructed all of this merely to reveal us?" As his squads organized their attack, Richards inquired. "Became utterly nondescript after years of playing the overweight security guard. Sometimes hiding in plain sight is the best option." Emma turned off the mall's primary access systems, following carefully planned procedures. "It's incredible what you can do when everyone undervalues you." With flawless tactical coordination, the first of the specialized troops broke through the outer perimeter. Emma fought them effectively, her size masking the accuracy of her blows. These operators were not your typical ones. They demonstrated the type of training that the most delicate government operations receive. According to a tactical leader, target is jeopardizing whole operational security. Ghost protocols are fully operational and advise site sanitization and instant withdrawal. However, Emma had anticipated this very situation. Her long-awaited reaction to the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation had come in the form of operators capable of revealing the entire plot. As explosions reverberated around the loading dock, Richards cautioned, "You're fighting a losing battle. You won't believe how high this goes. Governmental organizations, military headquarters, and power structures that are not normally supervised. I was meant to learn that in Burma." Emma engaged another tactical squad while maintaining control of her moves. The amount of evidence that exists after years of meticulous planning to disclose it is astounding. David reported the arrival of other specialized troops via her radio. "These operators aren't typical ones. They are demonstrating sophisticated elimination procedures and a response team akin to Black Ops." Through security feeds, Emma saw more containment units being disgorged by unidentified cars. Their apparatus betrayed a serious government power, the type of operators who dealt with issues that had to be resolved once and for all. Containment procedures have been compromised by Ghost. Richards announced the switch to maximum force operations on the command frequency. There is no proof left. There are no more witnesses. However, Emma had anticipated this very situation. Every camera, system, and access point had been mapped and adjusted. With meticulous planning, the containment teams were able to nullify their tactical advantages. There was an urgent warning in Jenny's voice. "Something is being moved through the lowest levels. Military equipment unlike anything I've ever seen. These federal agents are not your typical ones." Another tactical squad tried to breach Emma's position, so she engaged them. They demonstrated the type of training that came from specialist government groups with their flawless technique. However, she had been preparing for this very confrontation for years. "What you're tampering with is unknown to you." As his squad set up fire positions, Richards issued a warning. This extends beyond the use of weaponry or private armies that are constructing an entirely unaccountable force structure. That was the purpose of Burma. With their unconscious forms contributing to the expanding collection, Emma deactivated yet another containment unit. Building infrastructure for a larger project, private contractors working outside of official oversight and under the guise of criminal groups. As Emma's meticulously planned strategy reached its last stage, the loading dock erupted in fresh fighting. While police forces kept the perimeter under control, FBI investigators gathered vital evidence. Teams tasked with containing Richards were stuck between opposing troops. Their flawless cleansing effort was totally undermined. As Richards' teams made their last push, the service passageways reverberated with sharp cracks of gunfire. Using backup cameras, Emma tracked their movement and observed that they had adopted specific tactical formations, patterns intended to eliminate high-level threats in constrained areas. David reported over her encrypted channel that the east sector was infiltrated. Using the civilians as leverage, they are herding them in the direction of the containment forces. Through the maintenance tunnels, Emma glided with seasoned efficiency, her bulk somehow soundless in the darkness. She never came within sight of the two operators manning the evacuation route. She promptly collected their unconscious forms and led the civilian group to safer exits. Richard's voice echoed over the tactical frequency, "You trained these protocols yourself, but you never saw their true purpose. Sometimes going beyond the bounds of convention is necessary to keep the peace." Teams of FBI evidence workers moved swiftly through the loading dock, obtaining important records pertaining to the weapons operation. Emma observed how the government representatives observed from their command post, their faces displaying increasing anxiety over revealed ties. Jenny murmured over the radio, "Emma. They are removing some sort of secret hardware from the secure storage. It is of great interest to the suits." Richards deployed his remaining specialists, according to surveillance feeds from the third floor. The worst-case scenarios were proposed by their equipment, and they were trained to remove all witnesses and evidence when operations were jeopardized. According to a tactical leader, target is passing through Sector 7. Several containment teams have been turned off. Our own procedures are being used against us by her. Another security squad trying to flank Emma's position was disabled. Their strategy seemed flawless, but she had created these strategies herself, so she was aware of all their flaws and anticipated reaction patterns. There was an urgent warning in Mrs. Chen's voice. The men in suits appear to have unique authority as they take control of the federal agents. The FBI teams appear to be rather concerned. Emma observed the government authorities working with Richards through the cameras. Their hand signals indicated that all security threats, including their own operators who could be overly knowledgeable, should be immediately eliminated. Through the tactical frequency, Emma informed Richards that she could no longer contain this. Too many witnesses and too much proof that has already been obtained. It's finished. Logan's giggle echoed from his safe haven. You haven't seen it yet. The proof and the exposure are all components of their contingency plan, generating a crisis that warrants the use of the following stage. The outer perimeter was breached by fresh tactical units. Their actions demonstrated distinct training patterns, they were less focused on preserving deniability and more forceful. These were experts in elimination, not containment units. According to an operator, Ghost is jeopardizing several industries. Conventional containment techniques don't work. Request authorization to use the highest amount of force. In order to preserve the civilian evacuation routes and keep pressure on Richard's position, Emma carefully and precisely engaged the new units. This moment, when the actual nature of their enterprise would be revealed, had been anticipated for years. The tone of Chief Ross's voice was composed and professional. There are military groups coming from the south with big equipment and weaponry. These are not your typical army troops. As things got out of hand and beyond Richard's control, the loading dock was in disarray. His tactical teams were caught between local police, FBI evidence collecting, and Emma's well-thought-out countermeasures. One of the government officials gave the order to launch the last contingency. Complete sanitization procedures, no witnesses remain, and no evidence exists. Emma, however, had expected this reaction. Throughout the mall, emergency systems came on, interfering with night vision equipment and tactical communications. With meticulous planning, the containment teams were able to nullify their advantages. As his forces gathered for another attack, Richards remarked, "You constructed all this. Devoted years to creating the ideal trap. I should have recalled how meticulous your training was." The civilian evacuation was organized by Jenny's brother, whose Ranger background was evident in his crisis management. According to him, these aren't your typical federal operators. I've only seen these tendencies in classified missions. Emma observed the arrival of other unmarked vehicles via surveillance cams. The government representatives had an urgent meeting, their faces displaying increasing anxiety at losing command of the situation. A tactical leader cried out, "The target is moving through the western sectors. Several teams have been disabled. She is aware of all our procedures and backup plans." The outer boundary was reached by the first military units. Their actual affiliation was unknown, but their gear and formation pointed to specialized operations forces. Richards broadcast on the command frequency, "Remember Bangkok. Keep in mind what happens to those who reveal inappropriate information. It is sometimes necessary to give instances." Emma's size belied the accuracy of her motions as she moved with deadly ease through the maintenance tunnels. Before they knew their position was in jeopardy, 2 more elimination specialists fell. According to David, the suits are putting a strain on the FBI teams. Agent Johnson is not giving up on his attempt to obtain the secured evidence. There was an urgent warning in Mrs. Chen's voice. More weapons are being moved via the lower levels. Military equipment, such as the shipments we recorded. However, this is not the same. It appears to be a prototype system of some sort. As Emma moved closer to Richard's position, she incapacitated another tactical team. Every motion was deliberate, every blow was accurate. To counteract these advantages, years of training and meticulous preparation were required. Richard said, "You can't win this," as he set up fresh fire positions. "You don't realize how huge the operation is. Military leadership and government bodies have already approved the greatest response." Emma's strategy exposed their true nature, turning the loading dock into a battlefield. Tactical personnel attempted to control the scene as FBI teams defended their secured evidence. As their flawless operation came apart, the government officials watched in increasing concern. According to an operator, ghost protocols are seriously jeopardizing all sectors. Conventional confinement strategies have not worked. For the scorched earth response, ask for permission. However, Emma was ready for anything. She had gotten just the reaction she needed from the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation, which put all the important participants in a position to be seen. Emma moved through the maintenance tunnels while military soldiers guarded the outer border. They were ready to divulge to agencies they had no control over the true nature of their operation, the culmination of years of planning. How to make sure it exposed the appropriate targets while shielding others caught in the crossfire was the concern, not if violence would occur. The days of hiding behind false pretenses were coming to an end. Like a ghost, Emma Blake walked through her mall, methodically removing tactical troops while securing civilian escape routes. Serious operatives had arrived to Horizon Valley due to the Hellhound Hand, but they had made a crucial error. They had put innocent persons in her care in danger. Now that everything was in place, the real battle was only getting started. Sometimes exposing the truth about power acting unaccountably was a more powerful weapon than using force or deceit. And Emma Blake had been planning for years to reveal the truth at any cost. Everything changed with the entrance of the military convoy. Specialized forces deployed around the mall's perimeter, and Emma watched through backup cameras. There was something strange about their tactical strategy, even if their gear and formation patterns pointed to Delta Force. David cautioned over the secret line, "Those aren't regular military units. The way you move is incorrect. These private contractors are dressed in military attire." When his squads reunited, Richards's voice was one of icy delight. "Officially, there are no contingency response teams, and there won't be any records of what occurs here either." In an attempt to break into the evidence storage area, Emma confronted 2 elimination specialists. They have a perfect but dependable technique. Before vanishing into the civilian world, she had trained operators such as these. According to Chief Ross, FBI teams are safe, but these military contractors are attempting to take possession of the evidence by displaying federal credentials in accordance with national security procedures. Emma observed the government representatives coordinating with the newcomers via the security feeds. Instead of gathering evidence, their hand signals suggested urgent containment as they got ready to remove any proof of their exposed operation. Jenny's voice was one of controlled terror. "Emma. They are entering the civilian evacuation routes with heavily armed, professional squads. They won't let anyone go," Mrs. Chen remarked hurriedly. "There are more operators and newer equipment in the maintenance tunnels. They're putting up a sophisticated confinement system of some sort. As Emma moved through the service corridors, she deactivated another tactical team. These operators displayed distinct training patterns. They were pure elimination experts who were more forceful and less focused on preserving deniability. Did you not anticipate our surprise? Richards used the command frequency to transmit. The sole goal of these contractors is to eliminate issues entirely. No witnesses, no evidence, no trace. Logan's laughter reverberated from his safe haven. The actual operation is only getting started. The rest involved planning, constructing infrastructure, and proving deniability. You can now see what they have been genuinely aiming toward. As the contractors clashed with FBI evidence teams, the loading dock erupted in brutal violence. Without any official constraints, their approach demonstrated flawless coordination and military precision. According to a tactical leader, the target is passing through Sector 12. Several containment units have been turned off. Conventional procedures are useless against her familiarity with our systems. As more specialized troops were deployed across the mall, Emma observed via webcams. Their apparatus recommended the worst-case scenario, with workers trained to remove any evidence of compromised operations. Richards told his teams to keep in mind their training. Although Ghost is good, she is outgunned and outnumbered. At this level of response, nobody leaves. As they guarded civilian evacuation routes, Jenny and David worked together. These contractors are not like the others, they are less worried about witnesses and more aggressive. They no longer even make an effort to keep up cover stories. Another elimination team tried to get past Emma's defenses. Their method was flawless, but she had been training for this very situation for years. They used their own protocols to compute each strike against them. According to Ross, the suits are exercising some sort of extraordinary authority. Agent Johnson is not giving up on trying to circumvent FBI jurisdiction, but they are threatening dire repercussions. Emma monitored several tactical teams convergent on her position via security feeds. With formations aimed at destroying any opposition, the contractors moved with deadly efficiency. As his squads took their firing positions, Richards yelled, "You still don't understand what you're dealing with. This extends beyond private armies or weaponry. We're creating a system that alters the way power functions." Emma followed procedures she had carefully rehearsed and turned off the mall's primary electrical systems. Tactical teams discovered their sophisticated equipment was suddenly ineffective due to the sharp shadows generated by emergency illumination. An operator notified immediately that Ghost is jeopardizing containment procedures. Request authorization to use the highest amount of force. All limitations were removed. Mrs. Chen's tone was foreboding. Something is being moved through the lowest levels. Military prototypes that are unlike anything we have previously documented. Its protection is of great concern to the contractors. Emma, lacking practice, made her way through the maintenance tunnels. As she methodically destroyed tactical teams trying to stop her, years of training and meticulous planning came together. As Emma passed his position, Logan said, "This is bigger than you know. The framework for something unprecedented, military power without supervision or accountability, is being built by the private armies and the weaponry." Emma's strategy exposed their true nature, turning the loading dock into a battlefield. Tactical personnel attempted to control the scene as FBI teams defended their secured evidence. As their flawless operation came apart, the government officials watched in increasing concern. According to a contractor team leader, "We're getting new orders. Complete sanitization procedures are approved. Collateral damage is unrestricted." However, Emma was ready for anything. She had gotten just the reaction she needed from the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation, which put all the important participants in a position to be seen. As Emma moved through the service lanes, military contractors guarded the perimeter. They were ready to divulge to agencies they had no control over the true nature of their operation, the culmination of years of planning. One of the government officials gave the order to launch the last contingency. Thorough cleaning of all witnesses and evidence. Nothing that could jeopardize the operation survives. While protecting civilian evacuation routes, Emma methodically dismantled tactical forces as she glided about the mall like a ghost. Although the contractors had brought important operators to Horizon Valley, they had committed a crucial error. They had put innocent persons in her care in danger. All the pieces were now in place, but the real war was only getting started. Force and deceit were not always the most effective weapons. All it was doing was making them face their actual selves and their actual goals. Furthermore, Emma Blake had been planning for this very moment for years, when the appearance of legal authority would crumble and the truth of unaccountable power would be revealed. How to make sure it exposed the appropriate targets while shielding others caught in the crossfire was the concern, not if violence would occur. The days of hiding behind false pretenses were coming to an end. As Emma moved closer to Richard's position, she engaged her last defenses. The contractors were going to find out why certain ghosts refused to remain buried and why some opponents were better left unopposed. As Emma gained access to the mall's secret control systems, blue emergency lights created odd shadows through the smoke. Years of planning had culminated in this moment, when each redesigned camera and security procedure would fulfill its intended function. David used the secure channel to report several breaches in sectors 3 and 4. His accurate evaluation demonstrated his military experience. These contractors are looking for something special, not merely emptying the premises. As specialized teams spread out across the lower levels, Emma kept an eye on the tactical feeds. Their motions betrayed desperation, but their equipment implied serious skills. They were uneasy about something in the weapons cache. Jenny quickly said, "Emma, the suits are calling in more backup, heavy weapons, military transports, and they're giving up all semblance of legitimate authority." Emma observed Richard coordinating with his remaining operators via security cameras. As his flawless containment operation descended into anarchy, the colonel's countenance grew increasingly worried. According to a tactical leader, Target is violating all established procedures. Our sophisticated equipment is useless since Ghost controls the building systems. There was professional gratification in Ross's voice. Before these contractors could meddle, FBI evidence specialists made sure everything was documented and protected. The files are being personally escorted by Agent Johnson. In an effort to break into the maintenance tunnels, Emma confronted another elimination squad. Her preparations negated their tactical advantages, even though their technique was perfect. Their own training was used against them to perfectly calculate each strike. "Do you believe that you have won something here?" As his teams regrouped, Richards yelled. "We just had to speed up the timeline because of you." The true plan was always what came next. The radio carried Mrs. Chen's urgent warning. Prototype weaponry, specialized crews, and new equipment are being moved. These aren't your typical military suppliers. Emma moved with the skill that had made her a special forces legend as she moved through the service hallways. Before they knew their location was exposed, 2 additional operators were killed. One of the government authorities gave the order to authorize the final contingency. Thorough cleaning of all witnesses and evidence. Nothing jeopardizes the following stage. Emma, however, had anticipated this reaction. Throughout the mall, emergency systems came on, interfering with night vision equipment and tactical communications. With careful planning, the contractors' advantages were nullified. David said, "We have civilians secured. There's a problem, but these elimination teams aren't even approaching the evacuation routes. The weapons cache is more important to them than keeping witnesses." Logan's voice came from his safe place with a sinister pleasure. "You haven't seen it yet. Instead of constructing an operation, the private armies and weapons are constructing the infrastructure for something that has never been done before." As additional military contractors arrived, Emma observed via webcams. Their deployment patterns demonstrated their genuine objective, but their equipment promised serious tactical capabilities. Keeping things safe in the shipping of weapons at all costs. Ghost is moving through Sector 8, according to an operator's urgent report. Several teams have been disabled. Conventional confinement techniques have totally failed. With Emma's plan forcing their actual nature into the open, the loading dock exploded in exact brutality. While tactical forces attempted to restore control, FBI teams defended their secured evidence. As their flawless operation came apart, the government officials watched in increasing concern. Richards broadcast on the command frequency, "You've exposed too much. The subsequent stage cannot be jeopardized. No proof is left, and no witnesses live." As they guarded the escape routes, Jenny worked with Ross. These contractors are becoming desperate. Their techniques are failing, but their equipment signals black operations units. As Emma moved closer to the weapon stockpile, she disabled another tactical team. Every action was planned. Each blow is accurate. It took years of training and meticulous planning to demolish their enterprise in a methodical manner. According to a contractor team leader, the prototype is compromised. Ask for extraction and site sanitization right away. There is no way to identify the source of anything. Emma monitored many squads convergent on her position via security feeds. As their flawless operation came to an end, the contractors' formations displayed increasing despair despite their deadly effectiveness. One of the government officials gave the order to launch the maximum retaliation. Total removal of all security threats. The subsequent stage cannot be revealed. However, Emma had foreseen every possibility. She had gotten just the reaction she needed from the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation, which put all the important participants in a position to be seen. Recall your training. Richard gave his team's instructions. Although Ghost is just one operator, she wrote these protocols. Nobody makes it through this degree of reaction. While protecting civilian evacuation routes, Emma methodically dismantled tactical forces as she glided about the mall like a ghost. Although the contractors had brought important operators to Horizon Valley, they had committed a crucial error. They had put innocent persons in her care in danger. "We already have everything documented and secured, but the suits are implementing some kind of special authority, trying to override federal jurisdiction completely," Ross said. There was an urgent warning in Mrs. Chen's voice. "We've never seen such specialized equipment, and they're preparing something in the lowest levels. These contractors are quite concerned that it will be discovered." Emma moved with deadly elegance through the maintenance tunnels, her girth belying the accuracy of her movements. Before they knew their position was in jeopardy, 2 more elimination specialists fell. As everything fell into place, the real conflict was coming to a head. Force and deceit were not always the most effective weapons. All it was doing was making them face their actual selves and their actual goals. Furthermore, Emma Blake had been planning for this very moment for years, when the appearance of legal authority would crumble and the truth of unaccountable power would be revealed. Whether there would be violence was not the question. It was about safeguarding people caught in the crossfire while making sure the proper targets were revealed. The days of hiding behind false pretenses were coming to an end. As she got closer to the weapons stash, Emma engaged her last defenses. The contractors were about to discover why some ghosts refused to remain buried and why some opponents were better left unopposed. Emma Blake was prepared to prove to them why she had gained a reputation in special forces, and the actual operation was just getting started. Emma broke through the last security door, revealing the secrets of the weapons cache. There was something much more frightening hidden behind the typical military equipment. Systems prototypes that clarified the contractor's frantic reaction. Modified combat gear and electronic components shouldn't be found outside of classified institutions. David, who was following the contractor's movements, reported that they were reverting to defensive positions. Whatever's in that storage room has caused them to radically alter their strategy. Richard confronted Emma across the restricted area, blood seeping from a cut above his eye. The surviving operatives kept ideal firing positions around the prototype storage, but the colonel had lost his tactical edge. It was supposed to be contained, Richard replied, his professional demeanor betraying genuine anxiety. Power infrastructure were carefully moved during a planned deployment, but you pushed us. Now, direct deployment is the only option. While evaluating the prototype equipment, Emma documented escape routes. Although there were some unsettling changes, the redesigned systems demonstrated military engineering. All safety precautions and identifying markings had been taken out. Something is being activated by them. There was controlled terror in Jenny's voice. Lower-level energy values are increasing. These weapons, whatever they are getting more powerful. Emma observed the government representatives carrying out emergency procedures via security feeds. To the remaining tactical teams, their hand signals indicated that the prototype systems should be retrieved immediately and at any costs. According to a contractor leader, Ghost has penetrated primary storage. Systems prototypes are made public. To perform a priority retrieval operation, request authorization. Over the tactical chit-chat, Ross's voice broke through. These contractors are bringing in specialized equipment, such as sophisticated electronic warfare gear, while SWAT forces are manning the perimeter. 3 operators trying to enter the weapons stockpile were confronted by Emma. There was increasing urgency in their motions. These were no longer merely experts in eradication. They were attempting to obtain a particular item. As his crews moved into position, Richards cautioned, "You don't know what you're meddling with. These systems alter everything, including the projection of power and the maintenance of control." The Hellhound Hand was merely an experiment. The urgent message from Mrs. Chin arrived. Different equipment and more teams arriving through the service tunnels. They are carrying electronic countermeasure devices of some sort. Emma observed the impact of the prototype systems on everyday electronics. The security cameras wavered. The tactical exchanges grew unpredictable. These weapons disrupted normal technology, whatever they were. According to David, the suits are putting ultimate containment into practice. Electronic warfare units and heavy weapons. No longer do they even pose as official authority. From close by, Logan's laughter reverberated. The whole picture is still hidden from you. They are more than simply weapons, these prototypes. They are systems of control. Infrastructure for a larger project. Emma observed the other tactical groups modifying their strategies. Their previous accuracy had vanished, and they were making more desperate attempts to get to the storage location. They were shaken by the prototype systems. An operator reported that the target was blocked in primary storage. Conventional containment techniques don't work. Request permission to use the highest amount of force. However, Emma had already landed her job. The gathering of evidence had not been the only aspect of years of preparation. She had been anticipating the arrival of these prototype systems. One of the government officials gave the order to launch the primary response. Teams for retrieval with complete assistance for electronic warfare. The prototypes can't stay out in the open. As Emma's strategy reached its pivotal point, the storage area turned into a battlefield. While tactical groups attempted to breach her position, FBI teams gathered evidence. Everybody's equipment was affected by the prototype system's alarming energy pulses. As his operators readied themselves for another attack, Richard remarked, "You've exposed too much. These systems weren't yet ready for general use. The facilities aren't prepared." Jenny organized the safe evacuation of civilians. "There's a problem with their tactical equipment. Their equipment is being interfered with by the prototype systems. These weapons are not your typical ones." Another team trying to flank Emma's position was rendered ineffective by Emma. As the prototype systems impacted their tactical equipment and communications, their movements became more haphazard. According to a contractor team leader, priority targets have been selected. Prototype control systems have been compromised by Ghost. Conventional containment strategies are not working. As Emma inspected the altered equipment, the actual extent of the operation became evident. These weren't simply cutting-edge weapons. They were control systems made to function without regular supervision. One of the government authorities commanded that emergency procedures be followed. Full recovery of every prototype system. There can be no more evidence. However, Emma was ready for this. She had precisely what she needed, thanks to the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation. Evidence of military technology being altered for unapproved use. Richards cautioned as energy pulses interfered with tactical equipment, this changes everything: complete command hierarchies, control systems, and power structures. There is no turning back once these mechanisms are put into place. Professional concerns were carried by Ross's. All of the local electronic systems are being impacted by those prototypes, whatever they are. Conventional tactical equipment is starting to fail. Emma secured the storage space with deliberate precision. Although the contractors had brought important operators to Horizon Valley, they had never expected to encounter someone who was well aware of the significance of these systems. Emma Blake was prepared to demonstrate to them why certain technologies were too risky to be used unchecked as the last stage got underway. As Emma inspected the updated equipment, the energy signature of the prototype systems became more intense. These weren't your typical electronic weapons. They represented something much more pernicious. Control systems that have the ability to take control of and alter any nearby civilian technology. David observed that power fluctuations are becoming more widespread. His analysis reflects his military experience. They are not merely weapons. They are infrastructure of some sort, such as a control grid. Although their tactical equipment was malfunctioning, Richards's remaining operators positioned themselves defensively around the prototype storage. Interference crackled in the communication systems. Equipment for night vision flickered pointlessly. "You get it now?" With a tone of sincere urgency, Richards questioned. Exposure was not intended for this technology. It is difficult to contain once activated. The infrastructure as a whole begins to link. Emma saw the impact reverberating across the mall through malfunctioning security feeds. Electronic equipment started acting strangely in response to directives from the control units in the prototype. Jenny's voice was a controlled alarm, "Emma." The technical documentation was located. These systems are intended to take over electronic security, communications, power grids, and civilian infrastructure. The government officials are putting some sort of emergency plan into effect immediately, Mrs. Chen stated. More of these control units are being attempted to be activated. Through interference, Ross's tactical update crackled. All of the local electronic systems are being impacted by these gadgets, whatever they are. There is no communication from the police. Contact between FBI teams is eroding. In an effort to get to the prototype storage, Emma hired 4 contractors. As their sophisticated tactical equipment failed, their motions revealed increasing worry. These were no longer merely experts in eradication. They were making a valiant effort to stop the spread of technology. As his squads gathered, Richards cautioned, "You can't stop this now." As the systems connect, control protocols are being established. They were created to take over civilian infrastructure, and this is what they do. Dark understanding was in Logan's voice. The Hellhound Hand and the weapons operation served as a front for the deployment of these control systems and the construction of infrastructure for a purpose greater than military might. As the government officials coordinated with their remaining tactical squads, Emma observed them. Regardless of collateral damage, their hand gestures indicated that the prototype units should be retrieved right away. An urgent notification from a contractor leader stated that Ghost had exposed primary control systems. Beyond the containment range, the effect is spreading. Conventional procedures don't work. The prototype technology proceeded to activate, causing chaos in the storage room. Tactical units saw a growing lack of equipment reliability, and FBI teams found it difficult to stay in touch. As his operators readied themselves for another assault, Richards remarked, "You still don't see the full scope. Technology control is not the only function of these systems. They want to be in charge of everything. Infrastructure, communications, and whole communities of civilians." Jenny's voice broke through the growing din. Additional documents were discovered. This falls under the umbrella of Project Override. A national control infrastructure of some sort. One deployment point was the Hellhound Hand. When another team tried to breach her position, Emma disabled them. As more of their gear failed, their methods became desperate. Prototype systems were generating precisely the type of control grid for which they were intended. According to a contractor team leader, primary containment has failed. Wider connectivity protocols are being established by control systems. Request permission to destroy the site right now. As Emma studied the technical details, the operation's actual goal became evident. These weren't simply cutting-edge weapons. They served as the cornerstone of a framework intended to give total command over civilian infrastructure. One of the government officials gave the order to implement the last contingency. Complete devastation of every prototype unit. At this point, the control grid cannot be made public. Emma, however, had expected this reaction. Her preparation over the years had involved more than merely exposing the trafficking of weapons. She had been anticipating the unveiling of this particular technology. As more systems were affected by energy pulses, Richards clarified that this was the true plan. Control systems that are cloaked as illegal activities. Every site adds a new node to the grid. Growing interference was barely audible above Ross's voice. All of our electronic systems are being lost. Everything linked to civilian networks is being taken over by these gadgets. From her place, Mrs. Chen reported. Additional technical materials were located. Information regarding full infrastructure activation, Phase 2, and further deployment sites. Emma secured the prototype storage with deliberate care. Although the contractors had brought serious operators to Horizon Valley, they had never expected to encounter someone who was well aware of the significance of these control systems. As his remaining troops readied themselves for the final assault, Richards cautioned, "It's too late to stop it. The grid is coming into its own. These systems take over everything once they are fully operational. Power distribution, security, and communications." David used unsuccessful channels to get at his tactical assessment. This goes well beyond the technology of weaponry. These systems are made to be completely controlled by civilians. Huge takeover of infrastructure. When their operation failed, the government officials put emergency procedures into place. They indicated via hand gestures to the remaining tactical teams that all evidence, including the prototype systems themselves, should be destroyed right now. The entire operational security has been penetrated by Ghost. A head of a contractor reported in desperation. Exposure to the control grid cannot be limited. Encourage prompt site sanitization. However, Emma had anticipated this very situation. The real threat has been exposed by the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation. Technique used by the military to take total control over infrastructure used by civilians. Emma Blake was prepared to demonstrate to them why certain technologies were too risky to be used unchecked as the last stage got underway. It was no longer only about uncovering the trafficking of weapons. The goal was to stop a control system that threatened everything from activating. As the prototype control grid gained sway, the mall's electronic systems descended into total pandemonium. Random security door activations, unexpected emergency system activations, and a breakdown in regular communications all turned to static. David reported via backup routes that the grid effect was spreading. It now affects more than just our tactical equipment. All nearby civilian systems are being taken over by it. In order to preserve security, Emma moved swiftly to disable the key control units. She was familiar with comparable systems from her years in the military. Classified initiatives aimed at establishing control over infrastructure in hostile areas. Richard said the grid wasn't ready, His professional manner betrays genuine dread. These systems are made to gradually merge. Unpredictability characterizes forced activation. Emma saw the government officials taking drastic measures through malfunctioning security feeds. Around the prototype storage facility, their remaining tactical squads started laying demolition charges. Jenny's voice hardly made it over the noise. Emma. The complete project override documentation is in my possession. Under the guise of criminal organizations, they have started establishing control hubs in key cities. Mrs. Chen quickly added. The security systems in the building are randomly turning on. In elevators, people are stuck. The emergency doors aren't working properly. Everything is impacted by the control grid. As the FBI teams rushed to record the evidence, Ross communicated with them. Similar system issues are being addressed by federal agencies around the state. Whatever these control units are doing, Horizon Valley is not the only place it is spreading. 3 contractors tried to enter the prototype storage, but Emma disabled them. They had to rely on their rudimentary combat skills because their sophisticated tactical equipment had utterly failed. More quickly than anyone had expected, the control grid was growing. Emma grabbed another control device and said to Richards, "We have to shut it down. These systems are displacing civilian infrastructure in addition to damaging our equipment. Communications, power grids, everything is interconnected." Logan chuckled with real worry. This is not how it was intended to activate. The grid was intended to be deployed gradually, constructing control infrastructure one component at a time. It's too much, too quickly. The remaining teams were frantically coordinated by the government officials. Despite the potential harm to civilian systems, their hand signals indicated that all prototype units should be destroyed right once. According to a contractor leader, the expansion of the control grid is speeding up. The impact is extending beyond containment measures. The system is slipping out of our grasp. The storage space turned into a battlefield of broken gadgets. Security doors suddenly slammed, emergency sprinklers turned on at random, and electronic systems obeyed fictitious directions from the prototype units. As his operators battled with malfunctioning equipment, Richard said, "You don't realize what you've done. These technologies are intended to provide total control over the infrastructure, but if they are activated without control, everything is impacted." Jenny discovered more project override files and her voice crackled across backup channels. A nationwide control grid is being constructed. A portion of the infrastructure is deployed by each criminal organization to make it appear to be typical criminal activities. In order to deactivate the prototype units, Emma worked systematically. She had been waiting to uncover and halt precisely this type of technology, so her meticulous planning had been about more than just exposing weapons trafficking. Desperately, a contractor team leader reported that primary containment had entirely failed. Commonplace connectivity protocols are being established by control systems. The grid effect is uncontrollable. As Emma studied the activation patterns of the system, the real threat became evident. In addition to having an impact on local infrastructure, these control units were connecting to other deployment sites and establishing the precise control grid for which they were intended. One of the government authorities commanded that the place be destroyed immediately. All prototype units have been thoroughly cleaned. At all costs, the grid effect must be eliminated. Growing interference was barely audible above Ross's voice. 3 counties' police systems are falling down. Everything that is connected to civilian networks is being impacted by these control units. After reporting to work, Mrs. Chen discovered technical requirements for the project override. Under the pretext of illicit enterprises, they are constructing control infrastructure. Every website contributes a new node to the grid. Emma worked to shut down the prototype systems with perfect efficiency. Despite bringing serious operators to Horizon Valley, the contractors had never expected the control grid to activate beyond their control. Richard said as his surviving teams retreated, "We can't stop it now. Too many connections are being made by the grid. Everything will be under their control once these systems are completely integrated. Networks for communications, power distribution, and security. David used unsuccessful channels to get at his tactical assessment. I haven't witnessed anything like this in military operations. Everything electronic is being impacted by the uncontrolled activation of these control systems, which are intended for complete infrastructure takeover. As their operation came to a complete breakdown, the government officials put emergency destruction methods into place. They indicated to the remaining tactical teams by hand signals that all evidence, including the activated control systems, should be destroyed right away. A contractor leader frantically stated that Ghost had disclosed the whole project's override infrastructure. The grid effect is uncontrollable. To stop additional system integration, it is advised that the site be destroyed right away. However, Emma had anticipated this very situation. The real danger has been exposed by the Hellhound Hand's weapons operation. Military technology intended to use criminal organization cover to gain total control over civilian infrastructure. Emma Blake was prepared to demonstrate to them why certain technologies were too risky to be used unchecked as the last stage got underway. It was no longer only about uncovering the trafficking of weapons. The goal was to stop a control system that endangered everything linked from going into overdrive. It was the culmination of years of planning. Emma used the countermeasures she had created especially for this technology to gain one last access to the mall's concealed systems. As her well-designed procedures came into play, the growth of the control grid started to stall. David communicated through backup channels that something was changing. There is a decline in the grid effect. In every field, system interference is declining. Richards watched an increasing awareness as his flawless operation came crashing to a halt. As their tactical equipment gradually resumed its regular operation, his remaining operatives stood down. "You anticipated this," he muttered. "As a security guard, you spent all those years constructing defenses as you awaited the deployment of the control systems." Emma proceeded cautiously, ensuring security while shutting down each prototype device. Sometimes revealing harmful technology isn't the best method to stop it. When it is eventually deployed, it will be prepared to neutralize it. She observed the government authorities dealing with the fallout from their exposed operation by sifting through security feeds. While police units housed the remaining contractors, FBI teams had obtained all project override documentation. Jenny's voice became more audible. "Emma. We have everything. Technical details, deployment strategies, and documentation from all criminal groups that contributed to the infrastructure's construction." From her position, Mrs. Chen continued, "All security systems are operating normally again. The impact of the control grid on civilian infrastructure is diminishing." Ross worked with response teams from the federal government. Reports from other sites are similar. Whatever you've done, the grid's expansion is being stopped. All around the state, things are getting back to normal. Their tactical advantage vanished entirely, and the surviving contractors submitted. Emma had been well prepared for this technology for years. This is an attempt to use illegal cover activities to gain control over infrastructure. Richard said it would have worked. Resignation mixed with professional respect. Deployment over time by criminal organizations. Constructing control infrastructure gradually until it was too late to halt. Logan's laughter was filled with sincere awe. Playing the role of a normal security guard all this time. However, you were actually setting up a trap. Waiting for us to do it on our own. As their flawless plan came apart, the government officials were confronted by federal authorities. It was too late for them to try to destroy the proof. Project Override was previously protected and documented in its entirety. Verified control grid neutralization. A leader of a contractor reported. The effect is fading in every sector. The whole infrastructure is gone. Emma made one final trip through the storage section. Making certain that each prototype unit was turned off entirely. Her preparations over the years had paid off perfectly. "You've revealed everything. Richard admitted that he was protected by federal agents. The entire control infrastructure, the criminal groups, and the trafficking of weaponry. One security guard undid years of meticulous planning. Jenny worked with the evidence teams of the FBI. Each component is secured and documented. They are unable to conceal this or downplay what they were constructing. The entire procedure is made public. Stopping criminal organizations and the trafficking of weapons had not been the only goal of Emma's meticulous preparation. It was precisely this type of technology that she had been waiting to expose and destroy. Systems for controlling infrastructure that endangered the independence of civilians. The main containment units are stepping aside. Ross wrote. The federal government is encroaching. Similar activities are being made public in several states. Mrs. Chen spoke in a satisfied tone. All technical records have been kept. Documents from each participating organization. Every effort to use illegal cover to set up control infrastructure. As federal authorities put in place appropriate oversight, the government officials had to deal with the fallout. They had entirely failed in their attempt to use criminal organizations to create a deniable control system. The entire project override infrastructure has been rendered inoperable by Ghost. A leader of a contractor reported. The control grid is not in use. Encourage prompt adherence to federal regulations. As the appropriate authorities secured the situation, Emma observed through the security feeds. It had been a successful Hellhound Hand's weapons operation. Highlighting and revealing the real danger posed by the use of military technologies on civilian infrastructure. I had no desire to ever again be a hero. As federal officials escorted Richards away, Emma said. However, some threats must be neutralized. Certain technologies are too risky to use unsupervised. David made his final tactical judgment in a straightforward manner. Every system went back to normal. Whatever it was they were attempting to construct here. You stopped it altogether. As Emma's countermeasures concluded their work, the mall's electronic infrastructure resumed its regular operations. Project Override was prevented from establishing permanent control by years of meticulous preparation. We discovered further files. Jenny said. Information on further criminal groups that were involved. Additional deployment locations. Everything is being secured by federal agencies. Ross oversaw the last containment. Every suspect is in custody. Secured evidence. Whatever it was they were attempting to construct here. It has been exposed and halted. It was Emma's final trip through her mall. Observing the appropriate authorities secure the area. Serious operators had been brought to Horizon Valley by the contractors. However, they had never expected to confront someone who had spent years training to halt this particular technology. The last stage was finished. Additionally, Emma Blake had demonstrated to them the necessity of totally eliminating some hazards. The inquiry went beyond simply identifying criminal groups or weapons trafficking. The goal had been to stop civilian infrastructure from being controlled by military technologies. Emma went back to her security office while federal officers completed securing the scene. Patience was sometimes the most powerful weapon. Putting in years of preparation to neutralize a threat before it has a chance to spread. Tomorrow, the mall would reopen as usual. Emma Blake would carry on with her work as a menial security officer. Keeping an eye out for the next danger that needed to be subtly removed. It was best not to upset certain ghosts. However, when harmful technologies threatened the independence of civilians, others had to take action. Additionally, Emma Blake had demonstrated why she was regarded as a Special Forces star. Not only by fighting prowess, but by having the patience to wait years for the right opportunity to present itself. As Emma finished her last circles, the sun rose above Horizon Valley. The tranquil life wasn't always about concealing. It was about being precisely where you needed to be to thwart threats that most people were unaware of. 2 more amazing tales await you directly on your screen in the next section. You won't want to miss these if you like this one. To watch, simply click. Remember to subscribe as well. A lot would be at stake.
Disclaimer. This channel stands against all forms of intolerance, discrimination, racism, and violations of human rights. The stories shared here are original creations, developed to encourage reflection, understanding, and constructive dialogue. All content is produced with a commitment to respecting diversity and honoring human dignity.